Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha Massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing. He's White Knight Gawain, with a bounty of 85 million for belly and was regarded as the best swordsman in the East Blue today. That's Kuro of 100 Clans, with bounty of 16 million belly, and Jinnaman Demon, with a bounty of 11 million belly. Nami was stunned. At this moment, she remembered the strange reactions of the people around them when Gawain and others revealed their identities. So you guys were all lying to me? Chapter 53, Scaling and Boning. Gawain smiled faintly. You were the one who lied first. So now, Nami, knowing our strength, do you still want us to run away? No. Nami turned to look at Arlong. The anger and resentment that had been suppressed in her heart for many years suddenly burst out at this moment, and her voice was almost hoarse. She didn't know how strong Gawain was, but she knew that the number of 85 million was 4 times that of Arlong. Captain, help me kill him. Kill him. Kill him. Nami repeated these 3 words so mechanically that she didn't even know when the tears started to flow in her eyes. Gawain reached out and patted Nami's head, then turned to look at Arlong, feeling a fire burning in his heart. Now, simply killing Arlong could no longer release the rage that was raging in his heart, so he decided to do something else. Gawain slowly walked towards Arlong and said calmly, "Have you ever killed a fish?" Arlong was stunned, and then his face turned gloomy. Even though he had never heard of such a statement, it did not prevent him from instantly understanding the naked contempt in Gawain's words. "You. I have done it before." Gawain did not wait for Arlong to reply and continued, scaling and boning, gutting and ripping open the belly. As the sound landed, Gawain disappeared into the air in an instant. Whether in physique, observation hockey, or the skill level of the pussyfoot maneuver, he was superior to Kuro. The combined explosive speed of the 3 is many times faster than that of Kuro. Even with Arlong's physique, which is several times stronger than that of humans, he could only see Gawain's afterimage rushing towards him from a distance. The sharp edge of Guan's Masamune reflects the sunlight, making it even more dazzling. This guy is not just talking. He really intends to do this. Arlong was so frightened after realizing this that he broke out in a cold sweat and no longer had the composure he had just now that he was in control of everything. Whether he was willing to admit it or not, the Fishman had never been a dominant race in the Grand Line or in the New World. Even Jinbe, who is currently recognized as the strongest person on Fishman Island, is only at the level of one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Is it strong? Of course, it is strong, but compared to the monsters in the New World or even the 4 emperors, it is still insignificant and can hardly carry the banner of fishmen, to the extent that most of the time, the fishmen had to rely on Whitebeard's protection to survive. But the more this happened, the more unwilling Arlong felt. The fishmen, who are born with talents beyond those of humans, can only struggle to survive on the Grand Line. Why? Despite his mixed emotions, Arlong's body instinctively dodged Gawain's attack and barely turned sideways, but he could only avoid the vital points and was still cut by Gawain's sword. The muscle density and bone strength of the fishmen far surpass those of humans, but they are meaningless against the sharp edge of the Guan's Masamune. Gawain didn't even feel any resistance from the blade as he cut through Arlong's skin like butter. Whoosh! Blood splattered like a thin mist. The intense pain made Arlong's brain more aware of a cruel fact: the opponent in front of him was far more powerful than him. Just a little bit more, and he would really be ripped open. How could there be a monster like you in the East Blue? Who sent you? Marines? Whitebeard? Kaido? Arlong's mind was in a state of confusion, with countless speculations surging in his mind, but his body's movements did not slow down at all. With the impact of Gawain's sword, he fell sideways into the water and dived to the bottom of the water dozens of meters in an instant. Here, unless the gun is specially prepared for underwater combat, no matter how good the flintlock is, it can only cause effective damage within a few meters of the muzzle. Similarly, it can also greatly weaken the swordsman's slash, making it a strategic location to fight swordsmen. The shore has never been a battlefield for fishmen. On land, the fishmen have strength several times or even a dozen times greater than that of humans. Once in the water, the gap will only be widened. This is his only chance to turn defeat into victory. The seawater irritated Arlong's wound even more painfully, but his brain calmed down at this moment. His webbed feet could provide his body with unimaginable power underwater. The instantaneous burst of speed combined with the fishman's super strong body is even enough to crash through a warship. There's only one chance. Seize the moment when that guy pauses and kills him with one strike. No matter how strong his swordsmanship and swift his speed are, he is still a human being. There is an insurmountable gap between humans and the fishman. Thinking of this, Arlong's heart gradually calmed down. The nearly perfect tactics made him extremely confident, and the smile on his lips became more ferocious. He lay dormant underwater, quietly waiting for his opportunity. After a few seconds, Gawain's figure gradually appeared. He stood by the pool, looking calmly at the water. This indifferent expression made Arlong feel a nameless fire rising in his heart, but he knew that the opportunity have come. He swung his legs faster. The fishman's innate super-strong physique made his body accelerate to a terrifying degree in an instant, and he shot out of the water like a rocket, and the tip of his nose, which was shaped like a spear, pierced straight into Gawain's heart. Sharp darts. Puff. Arlong burst out of the water and shot towards Gawain like a missile. He even saw Gawain's death before his eyes, but suddenly, a voice full of contempt came to his ears. Is it fun? Arlong felt a chill on his spine instantly, and a palm in front of him grew bigger and bigger. Bang! Gawain held down Arlong with one hand as he rushed out of the water. The powerful impact caused him to crush the floor beneath his feet, but his body did not move at all. His physique had been upgraded by several levels, and with the bonus of the equilibrium feature, even in terms of pure physical strength, Gawain had already reached the monster level. Ignoring Arlong's shocked look, Gawain raised a sinister smile. This is a really big fish. Then Gawain stabbed Arlong's spine with his sword and pinned him to the ground. Arlong's sight was directed to the countless villagers lying on the ground outside Arlong's park. Those who still had a breath left in them looked at the scene in front of them and couldn't help but smile happily on their faces. The evil fishman that has been weighing on everyone's heart for many years is now like a fish on a chopping board. How ridiculous. Ha 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 ha. The laughter that continued to come made Arlong feel more and more humiliated. He struggled desperately, but his unconscious lower body made everything he did in vain. Gawain leaned over and whispered softly in Arlong's ear, "Do you know why Fisher Tiger chose to die even though humans gave him blood transfusions?" Arlong was stunned and gritted his teeth. "Do you even know about Tiger's affairs?" Gawain did not answer Arlong's question, and a hint of teasing flashed in his eyes. "It's because he knows that if he survives, he will become what you are now, hideous and ugly, no different from those humans who went to Fishman Island to poach. Hey, Arlong, do you want to try to change the rules of this world with me? Change this world where fishmen are persecuted?" "I do." At the critical moment of life and death, Arlong agreed without any hesitation. But Gawain's next words made him feel like he was falling into an ice cellar. "Well, of course I lied to you. I've told you all this not to make you repent and change your ways but to make you go to hell with pain and regret. After all, you love this game, don't you?" Chapter 54, Massacre the Whole Village. Arlong's pupils suddenly shrank, and he felt a chill on his waist. Gawain pulled out the Guan's Masamune, whose blade was over 1.2 meters long, and slashed at Arlong's lower body without mercy. Whoosh! A silver light flashed by. One of Arlong's legs was separated from his body, and although his spine was injured, he did not feel any pain, only endless coldness. And this was just the beginning. Gawain cut down Arlong's flesh bit by bit, first at the limbs, then at the chest and abdomen, just like handling a fish. Remove the scales and bones, and then open the stomach. Gawain did what he said. Arlong's wails echoed through the sky. The villagers lying on the ground in the distance heard the sound and smiled happily. It turns out that Arlong can also make such a sound, just like my child. Kokoyasi village, and that child's nightmare is finally over. At the entrance to the park, when Nami came to her senses, the screams in the park had already ended. She struggled to stand up and found a tall figure blocking her way. "It's a bloody scene after killing a fish. You'd better not go in." As he spoke, Gawain wiped off the blood on the blade, slowly put Guan's Masamune into the scabbard, and looked up to see Nami with his lips tightly pursed. "It's okay, I like eating sashimi." "Is that so?" Gawain moved aside. Nami walked into the park slowly. When she saw the blood and flesh on the ground, her face turned pale, but she forced herself not to vomit and said without turning her head, "Captain, forget it. I won't eat sashimi anymore." Nami's voice became smaller and gradually turned into sobs. The resentment that had been pent up in her heart for many years was released at this moment. Belmere. The sobbing gradually faded in the park. Gawain turned his back and stood at the door, blocking the view of the people at the door. Far away, two blood-stained figures walked side by side. Jin and Kuro, who had just finished the battle, were breathing steadily and had calm expressions as if they had done something insignificant. Gawain asked, All done? Jin spat out blood foam and twisted his aching neck. The bodies of these fishmen are extremely strong. Fortunately, none of them could escape. Kuro slowly put away his cat claws and said calmly, I have an accident. An octopus fishman was rescued by a sea beast that jumped out from the bottom of the water, but the other fishmen died. Octopus fishmen? Gawain was stunned for a moment, then realized who Kuro was talking about. He nodded and said, it's not a big problem. Now we just have to wait for our navigator to finish venting her anger. In addition, Gawain looked around. The villagers on the ground in the distance gradually recovered their strength and forced themselves to sit up. But the injuries left by the fishmen were still too severe. Most of them had lost the ability to move. If they did not receive timely treatment, they would die. Jin, ask the ship's doctor to come and rescue them. These are the people Nami cares about. We can't just watch them die. Understood. Jin nodded, took out a dendenmushi from his arms, dialed the number, and conveyed Gawain's order. A few minutes later, several pirates came over from a distance and, under the guidance of the ship's doctor, began to treat everyone's wounds. They slowly took Genzo down from the door, and after a careful inspection, they all gasped. This man's injuries were the most serious among those present. The spear almost pierced his lungs, but he was still alive. Something that he could not easily give up made him persist until now and even witness everything that had just happened. It was only now that Genzo had the chance to speak. He looked up at Gawain with gritted teeth and said, If you make Nami cry, even if it means death, I will bite a piece of flesh from you. Gawain glanced at him and said calmly, the only one who would make her cry is someone like Arlong. After saying that, Gawain led Kuro toward the building in the center of Arlong's park. After a search, he finally found the treasure in the basement that Arlong had looted and stored for many years. Squeak. Gawain pushed open the door to the basement. What caught their eye were mountains of banknotes and countless amounts of gold, which almost filled up half of the basement. Gawain asked subconsciously, how much is all of this? Kuro took a closer look and gave a rough number that even he himself was shocked by. The cash is probably close to 1 billion belly, and if we convert all the treasure here, it would be at least 2 billion. With this money, let alone building ships, it's enough to buy a few warships. After Gawain pondered for a moment, he said, give Nami her share, give some back to the villagers, and use the rest to build ships. After all, our next goal is the Grand Line. We will be sailing tens of thousands of miles, and the ship is our foundation. Kuro responded, understood, Captain. Then Kuro mentioned another thing, come to think of it, there is still information about Marines here. Gawain was slightly startled, and a familiar face appeared in front of him. I roughly know who it is, but that guy doesn't have the courage to draw his weapon on me. But in order to prevent that guy from doing anything unnecessary after we leave, I decided to leave something for him. Kuro glanced at Gawain suspiciously and saw a hint of a smile on the latter's lips. At the same time, on the 16th Marines branch, Nezumi held the dendenmushi in his hand with an unpleasant look on his face. What did you say? Arlong is dead? Are you kidding me? Arlong is a fishman from the Grand Line, how could he be so easily? At the other end of the dendenmushi, the voice of the Marine who delivered the message was trembling. The ones who made the move were White Knight Gawain, with the bounty of 85 million belly, and Kuro of 100 plans, and Jin, a man demon, who have now been confirmed to join the White Knight pirate. Nezumi froze on the spot, and a cold sweat broke on his back. When the story is connected to White Knight Gawain, everything makes sense. Not only did he refresh the East Blue bounty limit twice in a row, but even the monster demoted by the headquarters was helpless against him. That was a monster trained by Zephyr, the former admiral at the Marine headquarters. But Gawain completely suppressed such a monster in the previous battle at Raven Harbor, and Smoker had no power to fight back. With such power, not only in the East Blue but also in the Grand Line, he's a powerful figure. Damn it. What's even more terrible is that once the evidence of his contact with Arlong is released, not only will he be unable to continue to serve as the base commander, but he will also lose his life. But if this matter is handled well, it will become the biggest opportunity in his life. As long as he can take the credit for defeating the Arlong pirates, being promoted 2 levels in a row will not be a dream. Besides, how much wealth has Arlong accumulated over the years? When he thought of that number, Nezumi trembled with excitement. He tried his best to control his emotions, but his tone still trembled. Continue to monitor, and once they leave, immediately take control of Kokoyasi village, especially Arlong Park. No one will be allowed to enter or take anything away. No. A trace of ferocity flashed in Nezumi's eyes. Once they're gone, we'll just massacre the whole village. Chapter 55, Farewell, Departure, and the Pirate Flag, sir, this. The Marine who was watching was obviously hesitant. Nezumi could sense it and said, Blaze, if you do a good job this time, You will have a share of Arlong's property. After I get promoted, you will be the next base commander. Yes, sir. After hanging up the Den Mushi, Nezumi recalled Gawain's face and his previous experiences. Anger surged in his heart, but it was quickly suppressed. After pondering for a moment, he picked up the pen and began to write quickly. A few minutes later, a report, along with 3 photos, was sent from the 16th branch to the Marine headquarters. The headquarters liaison officer was slightly stunned when he looked at the printed photos. Why does this White Knight Gawain look familiar? Like I've seen him in a novel before? After speaking, he picked up Gawain's previous bounty, and after a brief comparison, he gradually put his mind at ease. The similarity is over 70%. It's common for these pirates to change their appearance and body shape drastically within a year or 2. There shouldn't be any problem. I'm just worrying too much. After speaking, he nodded, and after carefully checking Nezumi's report, he submitted it to the headquarters for further review. A few days later, at Kokoyasi village, with the demise of the Arlong pirates, not only the Kokoyasi village but also dozens of nearby villages were freed from their oppression. The name of White Knight Pirate spread in the surrounding area, and some villagers even spontaneously erected Gawain's statue in the harbor. Why does it look more and more like the one in the novel? Kuro looked at the crude statue in the harbor and muttered subconsciously. Gawain's mouth twitched, and he walked away quickly. In the harbor, boxes of supplies were loaded onto the ship. Even though the ship's waterline had reached a critical value, Jin was unable to stop villagers from Kokoyasi from moving boxes of supplies into the harbor. Everyone. That's enough, our boat can't hold anymore. Jin spoke loudly to everyone but only received friendly laughter from them. You saved the entire village, we can't let our benefactor leave with such regrets. That's right. Here's the last bit of bacon, oh, and some oranges and ale. As he spoke, the man took out 3 large boxes. Jin felt a headache, but he could not refuse the increasingly enthusiastic villagers. Looking at the sincere smiles on these people's faces, he finally understood why his companions who had returned from Raven Harbor had such expressions. A pirate who has always been disliked, hated, and feared will one day feel the sincere love and gratitude of others, which will bring a new and indescribable feeling. In short, at this moment, not only Jin but everyone on the boat felt that everything they had done was meaningful. Gawain and Kuro, side by side, squeezed onto the boat with difficulty, surrounded by the villagers, but they still couldn't stop the crowd surrounding the harbor. With his chest wrapped in bandages, Genzo, who had just regained the ability to move, stood at the edge of the harbor, watching the scene quietly. A gust of sea breeze blew, and the rustling sound of the windmills disappeared. He was the sheriff of the Kokoyasi village and was supposed to report to the Marines if he saw pirates, but this time, he just threw away the Den Mushi at home. Really? Are those guys really pirates? But at this moment, Gawain's voice reached Genzo's ears. Take this. Genzo subconsciously took the flying object, and after a closer look, he saw that it was a Den Mushi, making his expression freeze. I don't want anything from pirates. Gawain reminded, you can contact Nami. I won't take anything again. Genzo's face turned red, and he silently put the Den Mushi into his arms. Nojiko, who was standing next to him, couldn't help but smile and sighed, that man won't make Nami cry, right? He dares. Genzo pretended to be angry, but his eyes stayed on Gawain. I have inquired about their information. They once protected Raven Harbor and saved the civilians there. Their reputation is quite good. Although I am reluctant to admit it, and I don't want Nami to become a pirate. But the White Knight pirates are quite special. Compared to Arlong pirate, they are undoubtedly a better destination. After all, that child's dream is to draw a map of the entire world. Ah. Nojiko looked at Genzo in surprise. It's not easy to get such an evaluation from you. Snort. The two were chatting casually when Nami's voice suddenly came to their ears. Hey. Everybody. Gawain, who was standing on the deck, turned around and looked. Nami was seen running towards them from a distance, holding a box of tools for drawing nautical charts. Those drawing tools that once brought her countless nightmares now carried her dreams. She was no longer forced to draw for Arlong's ambition and instead fight for her dreams and her partner's voyage. I haven't even boarded the ship yet. You're a little late, kid. Kuro's tone sounded a little dark now that he was no longer pretending, but Nami didn't mind because, this time, she could actually say her name. There is no need to disguise herself for the sake of her village anymore. Before coming, she had already said goodbye to Genzo, and now her mind was focused only on the sea and the upcoming voyage. Bang! Nami stepped onto the deck, greeted everyone, and then hurried to the navigator's room. She carefully placed her things in the previously empty space. Drawing paper, a pen for drawing lines, a pointer for positioning, a few pots of orange trees obtained from Nojiko, and the windmill that had just been taken down from Genzo's head. Nami opened the porthole. A sea breeze blew into the room, and the windmill made a whirring sound. A few minutes later, Nami threw herself on the bed, and then her nose twitched. The smell was exactly the same as when she left. From today on, this is my territory. Several pirates passing by poked their heads out of the door with obvious smiles on their faces. Nami turned around and playfully smiled at everyone. Just as she was about to close the door, she remembered something. She hurriedly pushed the door open and left the room. She walked a few steps onto the deck and looked out at the harbor, where she saw Genzo and Nojiko. Everyone. Nami waved at the two of them. Wait until I draw the world sea charts. Then I'll be back. Genzo looked stunned at Nami's face. I haven't seen such an expression from that kid in a long time. Yes, she hasn't laughed so happily since Belmir passed away. The two waved to Nami, and then the pirate ship in the harbor slowly set sail and headed towards the distant horizon. Nojiko withdrew her gaze and looked towards the harbor. The sea breeze was howling, making a pirate flag flutter. Arlong's head was inserted on the top of the pirate flag, making it particularly conspicuous. But no villagers felt this was cruel, they only felt regretful that they could not eat Arlong's flesh and blood. Nojiko asked, will the Marines remove the flag in the harbor? Genzo said calmly, who cares? Will the Marines really care about this place? Or, do you think that rat would have the courage to take down that man's flag? Chapter 56, End of the Road. Have the White Knight pirate left? Yes, their ship has already left, and it seems that they have also taken away the woman who was previously teased by Arlong and his gang. Good. Now is our chance. At the branch base, Nezumi listened to the news from Blaze and stood up from his chair excitedly. Without any hesitation, he directly gathered a large number of Marines and dispatched 3 warships, which set out from the harbor and went straight down along the current. Half a day later, Nezumi looked at the harbor of Kokoyasi village, which was getting closer, and his hand holding the gun could not help but tremble. After the White Knight pirate left, the villagers who stayed here were nothing more than a dish of food in his eyes. Blaze stood beside him, watching the civilians coming and going in the harbor, and he couldn't bear it. Sir, do we really have to go to this extent? There are at least several thousand people in this village, and all of them must. Blaze shuddered, his voice suddenly stopped, and he didn't dare to continue. It was because Nezumi next to him had already pointed a flintlock rifle at his head. Stupid mercy. The next moment, bang! A bullet pierced Blaze's skull, bringing out a mixture of red and white flesh from the back of his head. As the blood splattered, it fell on Nezumi's face, making his expression even more ferocious. His purpose in this trip was to take credit for defeating the Arlong pirate, stealing Arlong's property, and, more importantly, destroying the evidence of his connection with Arlong. In fact, the latter is the most important thing to him. Looking at Blaze's fallen body, Nezumi was unprecedentedly calm at this moment and had gradually awakened from the state in which he was overwhelmed by his great achievement. Compared to merit, life is more important. Anyone who knows that he is connected with Arlong must die. Sail. Nezumi's angry roar awakened the dazed marine on the boat. They looked at Blaze's body and quickened their movements, fearing that they would be the next to die. Soon, in the harbor, a familiar pirate flag appeared in Nezumi's sight. It had a round shield as the base and a skull pattern printed on it. It was the flag of the White Knight pirate. What made Nezumi sweat even more was the rotting fish head stuck on the top of the flag. Is that Arlong's head? Pirates planted a flag on an island. How could Nezumi not know the significance of this incident? But at this moment, Nezumi was afraid that the evidence of his connection with Arlong would be exposed, and he was also eager to achieve great success in annihilating the Arlong pirates, so he could not care about so much. After all, as long as he destroyed the evidence and took the credit, he could find another place to work after being promoted, even the Marine headquarters. Go in. Control everyone. Nezumi ordered through gritted teeth. Then, 3 warships entered the harbor one after another. Hundreds of Marines armed with live ammunition got off the ships, quickly dispersed, entered every household in the village, searched out the villagers one by one, and gathered them together at the harbor. When everyone was at a loss, Genzo came hurriedly and protected Nojiko, then frowned at Nezumi. Sir, what does this mean? Is everyone here? Nezumi did not answer Genzo's question. After glancing around, the expression on his face relaxed, and he turned to look at Genzo jokingly. What do you think of this scenario? The Arlong pirates slaughter the whole village crazily, and Captain Nezumi fights desperately to defeat Arlong? Can you still call yourself a Marine? Genzo was extremely angry, but he secretly said in his heart, as expected, the boy guessed right. That bastard, Nezumi, really planned to attack Kokoyasi village. Recalling what Gawain said to him before he left, Genzo calmed down, and when he looked up, he saw the mocking look in Nezumi's eyes. Oh, the only people who can judge justice are the living. Don't blame me for not reminding you. The flag of the White Knight Pirate is planted here. Even a monster like Arlong can be killed by him. You'd better be mentally prepared to fight him." Genzo scolded. Nezumi remained unmoved and determined to attack Kokoyasi village. Genzo gritted his teeth and said, "Before Gawain left, he left you a letter. You'd better take a look." "Letter?" Nezumi was startled and frowned. "Bring it here." Genzo took out a letter from his arms and put it in Nezumi's hand. After the latter opened it, he only glanced at it, and his face instantly turned extremely pale, with sweat visible on his forehead. Genzo even saw Nezumi's body trembling uncontrollably and subconsciously asked, "What did he say?" "Roll." Nezumi was shocked and terrified because the letter facing him read, "All the evidence of your connection with Arlong is in my hands. If something were to happen to Kokoyasi village, these letters would appear on the desk of the Marine Bureau of Investigation the next day. Even if you make it to Impel Down, I will find you and kill you like I killed Arlong." When he saw the last word, Nezumi's hand trembled visibly, and he looked up at Genzo. "How did Arlong die?" Genzo raised a cheerful smile. "Do you know how to clean a fish? Have you ever eaten sashimi?" "What do you mean?" "Scaling and bone removal, gutting and opening the belly." As he spoke, Genzo's face showed an indescribable satisfaction. "When I saw Arlong's body, he had been cut into pieces. His body is still in the Arlong Park. No one is willing to collect it. You can go and take a look." When that scene appeared in his mind, Nezumi felt a chill. He turned around and left quickly with the Marine beside him. Madman. Complete lunatic. He actually went to such lengths for these bastards? Nezumi cursed loudly, but his increasingly pale face and trembling voice still exposed his inner panic at the moment. A few minutes later, Nezumi gradually calmed down. "That means the evidence is still in that guy's hands. Although I can't take credit for the Arlong pirates' defeat, I won't be immediately investigated by the Marine Bureau of Investigation. It's okay. Everything is okay." The frightened Nezumi could only comfort itself in this way, and a hint of color gradually returned to his face. "The Marine ships leave as fast as they come." Genzo raised his hand and patted Nojiko's back, looked at the warships leaving in the distance, then looked at the pirate flag standing in the harbor behind him and murmured, "This time, we don't have to worry about Kokoyasi village's safety. Whether the danger comes from the threat of pirates or the Marines." Gawain's calm face suddenly appeared in front of him again, and he shook his head unconsciously. "He is a reliable man, but he is a bit older than Nami, but..." Genzo looked down at Nojiko, who asked in confusion, "Genzo, what's wrong?" "Nothing, I just think you're almost old enough to find a boyfriend. Do you want to?" "Roll." The next day, Nezumi returned to the 16th branch base with 3 warships. He had just walked down the gangway when a familiar figure walked quickly from a distance, and at the same time, the Marines in the harbor raised their flintlocks and aimed at Nezumi's head. Nezumi naturally knew the identity of the visitor and frowned and asked, "Commodore Pudding Pudding? What does that mean?" Commodore Pudding Pudding looked at Nezumi in front of him with disgust and said in a cold and hard tone, "Your corruption has been exposed, so don't make things difficult for us." Nezumi didn't know that Gawain had tricked him, and when he saw the surrounding situation, he felt his legs go weak. "Commodore Pudding Pudding, is there some misunderstanding here?" "Oh." Commodore Pudding Pudding sneered and said, "Save these words for the Marine Bureau of Investigation." Chapter 57, Bounty for All. Shortly after Gawain left Kokoyasi village, he asked someone to send the materials about the connection between Nezumi and Arlong to the nearby 77th branch base. The base commander of this branch base is none other than Commodore Pudding Pudding. In the manga, he leads his men to destroy the Arlong pirates because he cannot stand their actions, but he is ultimately killed in battle. His character is definitely good. Calculating the time, Nezumi's matter should have been reported back to the Marine headquarters in Manaford by now. Gawain is now planning to join the 7 warlords of the sea, so he would like to avoid conflicts with the Marines as much as possible unless necessary. If the Marines don't deal with Nezumi, then he will do it before he leaves the East Blue. The pirate ship sailed towards Pala Island as planned. Along the way, the White Knight pirate accurately avoided many dangerous ocean currents and strange climates. Everyone on the ship's attitude toward Nami has changed from initial doubt to almost blind faith, and this process only took a few days. Now, her status in everyone's hearts is almost comparable to that of Jin, and she is the absolute core member of White Knight Pirate. After all, a good navigator can almost immediately improve the sailing experience. Now, Nami changed into a swimsuit and lay on a lounge chair on the deck, enjoying the sunbathing. Nami, who was 15 or 16 years old, had not yet developed her figure to a shocking degree, but the beginning signs of it were already visible. She has a graceful figure and a slender waist. Apart from the flat road, Gawain felt that everything was good. "Miss Nami," Here's your orange juice." The pirate, wearing a chef's hat, handed Nami a glass of juice with a flattering look on his face. "Thanks." Nami smiled sweetly, raised her hand to take the orange juice, took a sip, and her eyes lit up. Delicious. But at this moment, a news COO flew over from a distance, circled around the mast for a while, then slowly landed in front of Nami, threw down a newspaper, and then took the 200 belly that Nami took out and flew away. Nami opened the newspaper comfortably and looked at the headline on the front page of the newspaper with a smile on her face. The Arlong pirates were destroyed, and the base commander of the 16th branch base on the East Blue was arrested. The other stone that was weighing on Nami's heart finally fell to the ground at this moment. Kokoyasi village will have a new life. Gawain did not hide these things from her, so when Nami recalled Gawain's actions at this moment, she was even more moved. She looked down and saw the bounty notices. She couldn't help but show a look of astonishment on her face. This is. The bounty on Kiro is 33 million belly while the bounty for Jin is 20 million belly, and the bounty for the captain is still 85 million belly. It's this photo. Looking at the familiar photo on the wanted poster, Nami showed a mischievous smile on her face. She called everyone to the deck and laid out the 3 bounties in a row, instantly attracting everyone's attention. "Oh. Has my bounty increased as well?" A barely perceptible smile appeared on Kuro's lips. The bounty that once troubled him has now become proof of his strength. Is even the bounty on this guy, Jin, equal to that of Arlong? But for us who want to enter the Grand Line, this is the strength we should have. As Kuro muttered to himself, everyone's eyes were focused on Gawain's bounty. Especially when they noticed the constipated expression on the latter's face, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. Has the captain's photo been replaced by the Marines with a character in the novel? They even specifically specified that this version was Gawain's true appearance. A pirate pointed at the row of bold red characters on the left side of Gawain's bounty order and laughed until tears came out. Nami looked at Gawain, then turned to whisper to Kuro, "The captain is really the one who was the protagonist of that novel?" Kuro nodded repeatedly, "Yes, he's the one who was expelled for having an affair with the princess. However, he never mentioned this before. This. I was wondering why his reaction was so strange last time." Ha 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 ha. Gawain listened to Nami's bell-like laughter, glanced at the two of them unhappily, and simply turned around and walked into the cabin. For a moment, he just felt extremely depressed. When he saw the image of Sanji's wanted poster, he just thought it was funny, but now he realizes that the clown is actually him. Anyone who sees that photo will know the dark history left by the predecessor. You thief. You are really not a human being. How long do I have to bear this blame for you? Thinking of this, Gawain's mouth twitched. He turned his head and looked through the porthole, seeing the obvious smiles on everyone's faces. He could only smile bitterly and shook his head. Unlike those drinking buddies in the previous life who owed money and played tricks behind one's back, these bastards who mercilessly laughed in front of his face are the ones who can be trusted. Really? How boring. Why can't you get over that crappy novel? Not long after. The people on the deck gradually dispersed, and the sky gradually darkened. Nami looked up at the clouds in the distance, which were gradually becoming thicker, and her brows furrowed slightly. Is this a sign of a storm? In order to confirm her guess, she turned and walked into her own room in the cabin, picked up the telescope, and looked at the sea in the distance. The sky is overcast. Lightning flashes. The sea's surface no longer showed any signs of calmness but was rising and falling more and more restlessly, creating waves. After confirming this, Nami turned around and walked quickly into the captain's room while saying anxiously, "Captain. Storm, a very big storm is coming. It will affect the entire sea area. With the structural strength of our ship, I'm afraid it won't be able to withstand it." Gawain nodded, took out the sea chart, and after discussing it with Nami, the two of them frowned even more. "No, the scope is larger than I thought." Nami exclaimed, "It has been a long time since such a strong storm appeared in the East Blue. All our return routes were covered. We must find a harbor or an island to hide in. Otherwise, we will be in big trouble." Gawain nodded. He had almost 100% trust in Nami's judgment on navigation. After searching the sea chart for a while, Gawain pointed to an island. "Let's go there." Nami glanced at the location Gawain pointed out, thought for a moment, and nodded. "Island of rare animals. There is a mountain in the center of the island that can block the storm, and it is only a few dozen nautical miles away. This is undoubtedly our best option at the moment." Soon, Gawain's order was passed on. As the sky in the distance grew darker and a boat beneath their feet began to shake more violently, everyone sped up their movements. The ship turned around and sailed to the nearby island of rare animals. At the same time, on the island of rare animals, Three figures looked at the boat that was almost broken in the middle, then looked at the storm brewing in the distance and were silent for a moment. After a few seconds, Yozaku turned his head to look at Zoro beside him, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching. I was too stupid to let you lead the way. Chapter 58, How can the gap be so wide? Zoro was unaware of this. He held the map in one hand and touched his chin with the other. That's right. I followed the map. Johnny turned his head and took a look, then covered his eyes in pain. You got it wrong. Zoro's face turned red, and he immediately rotated the map in his hand, looked at the sea in the distance, and forcibly changed the subject. However, it can be considered a blessing in disguise for us to be able to avoid the storm on this island. It is simply impossible to cross the sea in such a storm and reach the next harbor with just this small boat. Seeing this, Yozaku and Johnny had no choice but to accept it. After all, what Zoro said was not wrong. On the distant sea, the waves were surging, the clouds were gathering and flashing lightning, and it was obvious to the naked eye that a storm was about to hit. Besides, the two had another worry. Before, the members of White Knight Pirate appeared in Dia Harbor. They put a lot of effort into tricking Zoro over there, and Yozaku even contributed his already empty wallet to this. Whenever he remembers this matter, he feels a pang of pain. Therefore, if they go to other ports at this time, there is a small possibility that they will meet people from White Knight Pirates. The opponent now has the title of the best swordsman in the East Blue. If Zoro were to meet him, given his personality, he would draw his sword and challenge him on the spot. The result is predictable. Being able to avoid the other party by being here is a blessing in disguise. Yozaku comforted himself in this way and couldn't help touching his wallet. He was speechless for a moment, with tears in his heart. Hide the ship first. We will take the supplies and find a safe place nearby to avoid the storm. Then we will capture the nearby pirates according to the plan. Johnny made the arrangements, and Yozaku naturally had no objection. Zoro's brows slightly furrowed, he raised his hand and pointed to the sea in the distance and said, "What is that?" Yozaku looked up into the distance. A familiar pirate flag appeared in his sight, with a round shield as the base and the skull logo printed on it. Who else could it be but the White Knight Pirate? No, I've already hidden myself on a deserted island, and I still can't escape? You are somewhat impolite. Zoro, we. Yozaku turned around and saw Zoro's eyes gradually getting hotter, and his heart immediately sank. He reached out and touched his wallet again, only to feel so much pain that he couldn't breathe. Johnny, who was standing next to him, also had a twitching mouth and was speechless for a while. Zoro's hand was already on the hilt of his sword, no mistake. That's definitely the White Knight Pirate flag. The greatest swordsman in the East Blue? Before entering the Grand Line and challenging the strongest swordsman in the world, it seems like a good idea to first take the title of the number one in the East Blue. Besides, if I'm lucky, can the title of the best in the East Blue also be heard in heaven and to Kuina's ears? Thinking of the promise he made with Kuina, Zoro's eyes became more determined. He walked towards the coastline slowly. As he walked, his three swords flashed with cold light while being slowly unsheathed. After a few years at sea, although his strength is still far from what it was when he appeared in the anime, he has gradually made a name for himself in the East Blue. He had challenged countless swordsmen in the East Blue in the past, but those people could hardly last more than a few moves in his hands. But at this moment, just looking at the figure standing on the bow in the distance, a trace of cold sweat has already slid down Zoro's forehead. This guy is definitely not on the same level as the others, but how can I retreat in the face of difficulty? Yozaku and Johnny looked at Zoro's figure and wanted to stop him, but in the end, they couldn't open their mouths. It's because after being together for a long time, they have realized that once the man in front of them makes up his mind, he will not change it. With Zoro's strength, he shouldn't be defeated even against a monster like that, right? Yozaku swallowed his saliva, but his hand was already nervously holding the scimitar at his waist. Johnny said solemnly, "If Zoro is really defeated, we must rescue him at all costs. Don't forget, he once saved our lives, now it's time to repay him." Yozaku nodded. "Isn't that a matter of course?" Far away, the pirate ship gradually anchored on the beach. Gawain, along with Nami and the others, quickly got off the boat and headed towards where Zoro was. When he saw Zoro's figure on the sea just now, he didn't recognize him. But now, although the man in front of him looked a little immature compared to his impression of him. However, that defiant look and the three swords at his waist undoubtedly showed that the other party was one of his biggest targets in East Blue. Roronoa Zoro, the future king of Hell and a man with gold level potential. You should know that with Kuro's promotion to the silver level and Jin's bronze level potential, his physique and observation haki have been upgraded by 2 levels after more than a month. So what can Zoro, with the gold level potential, contribute? Whenever he thought of this, Gawain's eyes were filled with uncontrollable excitement. At this moment, He already regarded Zoro as his own. Soon, the two sides confronted each other on the beach. When swordsmen communicate with each other, a glance is often enough to convey each other's intentions. Gawain looked at Zoro's burning eyes, put one hand on the sword at his waist, and said, "Tell me your name." "Challenger." A hint of a smile appeared on Zoro's lips. "Roronoa Zoro." Click. Zoro bit a sword and then clenched both swords tightly. At this moment, an extremely sharp aura rises from his body. "Draw your sword." The best swordsman in the East blew. Gawain raised his eyebrows, and a sense of evil interest inexplicably arose in his heart. He thrust Guan's masamune and his scabbard into the ground, then slowly took out a dagger from his arms and said with regret, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any smaller toys on me." "Toy?" Zoro was slightly stunned, and anger rose in his heart because Gawain's attitude was humiliating. "Then start by forcing you to draw your sword." As he spoke, Zoro changed his stance, with the two swords in his hands crossed like bull horns, and his whole aura became more and more fierce. The thin clothes were rustling in the sea breeze, and the invisible murderous aura had already locked onto Gawain. Charming demon, sleepless night onigiri. After a roar, Zoro suddenly rushed forward and was in front of Gawain in the blink of an eye. The three swords chopped towards Gawain's throat from three different directions. He had used this move to kill countless pretentious swordsmen, so he had absolute confidence in this move, but he was also aware that there was a gap between himself and the man in front of him. Zoro's eyes were sharp, and the three silver rays that passed by were blocked in the next second. Bang! The toy-like dagger in Gawain's hand was pressed directly against the point where Zoro's three swords intersected. Zoro felt as if he had chopped on a wall, and his arms were shaking constantly due to the recoil of the sword. No matter how big the gap is, there must be a limit. Damn it! How can the gap be so wide? Chapter 59, 100 times Zoro's instinct as a swordsman made him realize the gap between himself and the man in front of him the first time he saw Gawain. But when he experienced this gap, he was still shocked. A dagger called a toy can easily block the killing move that he developed. Is he really still human? Can pure swordsmanship really reach this level? Along with Zoro's doubts, Yosaku and Johnny were dumbfounded in the distance. They could accept the huge gap between Zoro and Gawain. After all, Zoro's opponent was the pirate with the highest bounty in the East Blue, even higher than that of Fire Fist Ace. But it has reached such a scale that it is beyond comprehension. No matter how powerful humans are, there must be a limit, right? Yosaku said through gritted teeth. Johnny, on the side, couldn't even speak. Huh. A sea breeze blew by. With his vest soaked, Zoro could only feel a chill rising from the soles of his feet. The man standing in front of him just said lightly, "Are not you going to force me to draw my sword?" Zoro. Certainly. The shock and confusion in Zoro's eyes instantly dissipated, replaced by heat as hot as the sun. "I understand now. If I wasn't as powerful as a monstrous creature, how could I possibly make my name resound throughout the heavens and let that guy hear it?" "Nice look." Gawain nodded. The next moment, the three swords in Zoro's hands pressed towards Gawain like a violent storm. At this moment, Zoro realized the huge gap between the two sides and completely let go. It was because the man in front of him was the most powerful swordsman he had ever encountered in his life. Even if all his previous opponents were added together, they would still be inferior to the man in front of him. Moreover, as for the sword in the man's hand, that simple but extremely long sword, Zoro always felt that he had seen it somewhere. But now he was in no mood to think, the only thing on his mind was the opponent in front of him. His sword moves were far more intensive than those of an ordinary swordsman, like a gust of wind that could torture people to death, blocking all of Gawain's opportunities to attack. However, these sword moves that seemed flawless to Zoro seemed too weak in Gawain's eyes. He didn't even need to use a cheat skill like observation hockey. He could easily break them with just his level 5 swordsmanship. The dagger in Gawain's hand stabbed out like raindrops, and he was able to block Zoro's swordsmanship every time. Bang! 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 A series of intense metal clashing sounds reached everyone's ears. In everyone's eyes, Zoro's swordsmanship was already fierce and fast as lightning, but Gawain easily resolved it with just the slightest effort. Is this the strength of Captain Gawain? It's really as powerful as a monster. Nami opened her mouth and looked into the distance, unable to help but exclaim in admiration. At this moment, she finally had a sense of Gawain's strength and finally understood why Gawain could directly kill Arlong, who had suffocated Kokoyasi village and the surrounding marines for 5 years. It's because Gawain's swordsmanship has reached an inhuman level. Kuro folded his hands, his expression was normal, and said lightly, "If he can't even do this, then the captain should have been replaced long ago. And this level is, for that man, just an after-dinner pastime at best." Jin nodded indifferently, agreeing with Kuro's point of view. then looked at Yosaku and Johnny in the distance and said lightly, "There are 2 more mice. I'll go take care of them." On the battlefield, Zoro was sweating profusely. The almost endless sword slash caused a significant depletion of his physical strength. The movements of his hands just slowed down a little. But the dagger in Gawain's hand was like a poisonous snake, reaching in from the gap. The tip of the dagger pierced through Zoro's clothes and stopped precisely on his skin. "The winner is decided." Gawain's indifferent voice fell into Zoro's ears, and the latter's mouth curled up slightly. "No. The winner is still to be determined." Whoosh! Zoro suddenly rushed forward, enduring the sharp pain of the blade piercing his chest, and the 3 swords in his hands were also ready to complete the final attack. Fight to the death. "You really make me happy." Gawain laughed, let go of the dagger in his hand, and exerted force on his feet. With his extremely fast speed, he appeared at Zoro's side first. Then, his punch hit Zoro's abdomen hard. The latter's sword moves suddenly changed, his back arched, and his body went limp like a cooked shrimp. Click. Zoro half knelt on the ground and coughed up a mouthful of blood, but he stood up again the next second with the same determination in his eyes. How can a man kneel in front of difficulty? "Well said." Gawain nodded calmly. "Would you consider coming to my ship? Soon, we will be heading to the Grand Line and even the latter half of the Grand Line, to the New World, where there are countless peaks waiting for you and me to climb." Zoro shook his head. "I can't bow to anyone until I've fulfilled my promise to that guy." "That's a pity." Gawain turned around, picked up the Guan's masamune that he had stuck on the beach, and slowly pulled it out. Clang. The silver-white blade is extremely eye-catching, even under the moonlight. The blade is long and narrow, without complicated sword marks, and it exudes an extremely sharp aura in its ordinary form. Zoro instantly remembered when he had seen this sword. "This is Kaoshiro-sensei's sword. How did it end up in your hands?" Gawain smiled faintly. "This guy chose me." As Gawain spoke, Guan's masamune emitted a soft sound and trembled a little. Zoro also felt it and said in surprise, "Is there a spirit in this sword?" "Every sword has its own will and character. It seems you haven't found the one that perfectly suits you yet. Wouldn't it be a pity to die with such regrets? That man, the strongest swordsman in the world, still exists in the New World." Speaking of hawk eyes, Zoro shook his head, which was gradually dizzy due to blood loss, and looked up at Gawain and said, "How big is the gap between you and that man?" "It's 100 times bigger than the gap between you and me." "Oh." After a chuckle, Zoro lost consciousness and slowly fell down. After a few seconds of silence, Gawain put Guan's masamune into the scabbard. He raised his hand and summoned the ship's doctor to provide emergency treatment for Zoro's injuries. Gawain doesn't want to give up easily on a seed with gold-level potential. As long as the person is alive, there is still hope for recruitment. Yosaku and Johnny, who had been subdued by Jin in the distance, gave up struggling and allowed the pirates to tie up their hands and feet. Fortunately, that man saw Zoro's potential and wanted to recruit him. This way, Zoro will not be in danger for the time being. "With our strength, we can't resist these monsters." Yosaku gritted his teeth and, for the first time, began to blame himself for his weakness while Johnny beside him said nothing. The battle on the beach, which seemed like a farce, has ended. But the howling gale in the sky suddenly came at this moment, bringing with it raindrops as big as pins as they fell on everyone's faces. The storm is coming. After Gawain ordered his men to hide the boats, he led everyone towards the island. Suddenly, a gloomy voice came from the distant jungle, "Get out of here. Otherwise, if you take one more step forward, you will meet with misfortune." Chapter 60, Treasures. A smile appeared on Gawain's lips, and he ignored the warning and took a step forward. Bang! A gunshot was heard from the dense forest ahead. Before the black bullet touched Gawain's body, it was cut in half by a silver blade light and flew away, brushing against Gawain's clothes. "Take one more step closer, and my bullet will be aimed at your head." A warning voice was heard again in the dense forest. Gawain, however, had already seen his fear and anxiety and even guessed the identity of the speaker. As he continued to move forward, a box with dense grass on top appeared in Gawain's sight. "What is that?" Nami looked at the box in front of her curiously, then pointed to the flintlock rifle beside her. "The gun there is even smoking." As the sound landed, the box trembled noticeably. Gawain even saw a small section of the sole of the foot exposed underneath. He took a few steps forward, grabbed the dense grass in the box, and lifted it up. A middle-aged man's face suddenly emerged from the box. Except for his arms and feet that could barely stick out of the box, the rest of his body was squeezed inside the box. "Stop pretending, you were the one who fired the gun just now." Gawain has recognized that the strange man trapped in the box in front of him is the impressive box monster, Gaimon, in the original manga. He was unfortunate because the treasure he had guarded for his entire life was just a few empty boxes, but he was also lucky because here he found something that was truly worth protecting. "Let me go, pirate." Kaiman kept struggling, but his short hands couldn't even reach his head. The scene was extremely funny. "What?" Nami squeezed out of the crowd and looked at the person struggling in Gawain's hands with a look of great surprise. "A person in a box? How does he live in this situation?" The people around also became curious and gradually gathered around. Even Kuro, who was usually the most indifferent, couldn't help but pick up a stick and poked Kaiman's face, causing Jin's mouth to twitch. "You're being a little rude." Suddenly, there was a roaring sound from the woods in the distance, and dozens of strange-looking animals rushed out, baring their teeth at Gawain, who was holding Kaiman. Even in the face of the murderous aura emanating from Gawain, they did not back down at all. Kaiman's pupils shrank, and he curled up in the box. Unable to turn around, he could only say anxiously, "Go back quickly. I'm able to defeat a group of guys like this by myself. And you? If you dare to hurt my friends, I will never let you go." After speaking, Kaiman waved his short hands, which was not only intimidating but also made Gawain's mouth twitch. "Why do you make me look like a villain?" Gawain touched his head helplessly and slowly put Kaiman down. As soon as the latter landed, he ran to the front of the group of strange beasts with his short legs, protecting them with his not-so-tall body, and then looked at Gawain with a wary look. "Don't think of hitting them." Gawain spread his hands. "As you can see, we are a group of pirates. A storm is coming, and we need a place to take shelter. If it's convenient." Kaiman's eyes lit up, and he said, "Okay, but I need you to help me get something." Gawain nodded. He already knew what Kaiman needed him to get for him. "You can only come alone." "Okay." After saying that, Gawain said a few words to Kuro and the others, asked them to wait here, then turned around and followed Kaiman away. As for Gawain's safety, no one mentioned it except Nami. After all, if the opponent could even beat Gawain, everyone present except Kuro would be dead. Although Kaiman has short legs, his steps are not slow. A few minutes. The two walked to the depths of the island and headed towards a mountain. Gawain followed behind him and couldn't help asking, "Aren't you afraid that I will attack you?" Kaiman paused. "I can see that your strength is far superior to other pirates I have seen. If you were really that evil, I would have been dead when I fired that shot. You're not arrogant towards the weak. You're not like a typical pirate." After saying that, Kaiman took another step with his short legs and headed towards the depths of the island. Gawain stood there in a daze for a few seconds before he smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Does this count as someone giving me the nice guy card? But it doesn't feel bad." Gawain quickly followed. Soon, the two came to the top of a mountain. A huge rock stood in the middle of the mountain, nearly 20 meters above the ground. Given Kaiman's height, he could not climb up even with the help of his animal friends. "Right there, help me take down the box on top. Even if you want to take the treasure inside after opening them, it doesn't matter. I only want to see what the treasure I have been guarding for so many years is." Kaiman's tone was excited. Gawain, who already knew the answer, was not interested in this. He grabbed Kaiman and threw him up. "You should see it for yourself," Gawain said calmly. Kaiman above was not in the mood to listen to him. After a few unboxing sounds, there was silence. After a while, there was a long sigh, so, at that time, they already knew that these boxes were empty? Kaiman muttered. But at this moment, Gawain's voice came from below again. "How is it? Is there something valuable?" Kaiman was stunned. Then he looked around. This is the highest position on the island. From his perspective, he can even see all the places on the island. Strange animals were moving across the island, heading towards him. How can these friends who have been with him for many years not be a treasure? Kaiman raised his hand and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. "Ah! It is truly the greatest treasure, worth spending a lifetime protecting." Snort. Gawain smiled faintly and caught Kaiman, who was falling from above. The latter looked at Gawain and asked, "Hey! I have found my treasure, what about you? After you set out to sea, is there something you would want to get even if it costs you your life or waiting for several years? If not, if you don't have great power, sooner or later, a stronger enemy will take away everything." Gawain was stunned, his mind went blank. He had never thought about this question before. Since he transmigrated to this world. With the sword in his hand and the efforts of his companions, no opponent in the East Blue could stop him. Everything went too smoothly. Whether it was Morgan, Krieg, or Arlong, none of them could match his swordsmanship. His original plan was to make a name for himself in the Grand Line and become one of the 7 warlords. But this is just one part of the plan, not what Gawain ultimately wants. "I must get it even if it costs my life." Chapter 61, Gambling. Gawain muttered to himself, and after a moment's silence, he said, Isn't it precisely to find such answer that we chose to go out to sea? Gaiman was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Gawain. That's right. However, to thank you for your help, there will be a party tonight. Gawain smiled faintly and followed Gaiman away. Along the way, countless wild beasts living in the jungle gathered behind Gaiman. During the past 20 years, many wild animals have experienced the cycle of life and death, but after separation, there is also a new life. The friendship between them and Gaiman did not disappear with death but instead became a kind of inheritance. During this journey, Gaiman had already found his treasure while Gawain was still on the road, without knowing when he had been followed by many companions. The banquet was held in a cave in the middle of the island. Surrounding the central fire, Gaiman took out the fruit wine he brewed, smoked fish and fruits picked by his animal friends from the surrounding woods, and placed them in the middle of the banquet for everyone to eat. Kuro raised his hand and clinked glasses with Gaiman. I'm sorry about what happened just now. Gaiman waved his hand. Stop talking, let's drink. After saying that, he ignored Kuro and poured a big gulp of wine into his mouth. Seeing this, Kuro grinned and drank a big bowl of wine as well. Gaiman has difficulty moving, and even with the help of his animal friends, the wine he brews cannot be considered fragrant and delicious. But the wine itself is not the protagonist of the banquet, and the ceremony is just an embellishment. The smiles and joy on everyone's faces at this moment are the most important things in the banquet. The banquet lasted for several days and nights. Everyone didn't stop until the storm outside the cave completely subsided. Gaiman, who hadn't seen a living person for 20 years, burst out with all his pent-up enthusiasm, and even though Gawain and the others were already drunk, he did not stop. On the beach, the pirate ship that was stranded due to the storm was pushed into the sea with everyone's joint efforts. Fortunately, sufficient protective measures were taken when the ship was moored, and although there were many damaged parts, it did not affect navigation. Gawain left a den mushy for Gaiman and told him that if he needed anything from the outside world, he could contact him directly, and then he left with his companions. After the storm, there's a sunny day, with light wind and gentle waves on the sea, and warm sunlight falling from the sky and shining on everyone. Nami, who was basking in the sun, quietly turned sideways and saw a green-haired figure pushing open the door of the cabin and slowly walking out. Where is this? Where are Johnny and Yozaku? Zoro glanced around and asked. After a few days, the wound on his chest was almost healed, but he only woke up today. Although his face is still a little pale, it no longer affects his fighting ability. The 3 swords on his waist are the best proof. Hey, you're awake? Gawain, who was sitting on the deck wiping the Guan's mass immune, looked up at Zoro. These days, he had already used the badge ability to check Zoro's potential, and it was consistent with what he had speculated. This also means that even if there is no breakthrough in the middle, Zoro does not need to realize his true heart like Kuro. He can become one of the strongest pirates in the sea. Such potential is even higher than that of Gawain at the moment. Naturally, he wanted to bring him under his command. You saved me? Zoro looked at Gawain, holding the sword at his waist with one hand. He was eager to try it again, but he still suppressed his desire. If you want to kill me, you'd better do it sooner rather than later. You owe me 3 lives. Gawain stretched out 3 fingers and shook them, with a smile on his face, and said, It's not good to reject your savior like this. Zoro's eyelids jumped. I only have 1 life, right? Where did I get the extra 2? Gawain pointed to Johnny and Yozaku, who were mopping the deck in the corner. Aren't your 2 little brothers considered human beings? Zoro was silent for a moment, then looked up at Gawain. How can you let them go? Gawain said seriously, how about we make a bet? It's still about 10 days voyage from here to my base. You can attack me in any way you want. As long as you can make me bleed, I will not only give you your freedom but also hand these 2 little brats over to you. Where are the chips? Gawain pointed at Zoro. You. Humphrey. Zoro showed a sly smile on his face. Now that we've came to this point, if I refuse, I'd be immature. But even if I lose to you, I will leave this ship the day I surpass you. After all, I have a promise that I must fulfill even if it costs my life. Gawain said calmly, Are you already looking for a way out before it even starts? But these 2 things are not in conflict with each other. Forget it. There is no point in saying more. I will assume that you have already accepted the bet. As Gawain finishes speaking, 3 silver blade lights grew bigger and bigger in front of Gawain, and Zoro, who had been unable to hold back any longer, attacked immediately. Obviously, he was unwilling to accept his last failure. An anxious guy. Gawain had a smile on his face and thrust Guan's mass immune in his hand forward. The same scene happened a few days ago again. Gawain's sword was at the intersection of Zoro's 3 swords. Even if Zoro tried his best, he could not move forward even a little bit. Just this time, Zoro was mentally prepared for this. If he can do something with a dagger, It would be strange if you can't do it with the sword he's most familiar with, or even the sword that is in tune with his mind. As this thought came to his mind, Zoro pulled back his two arms, wanting to retreat and accumulate strength for another wave of attack, but the snake-like Guan's mass immune in Gawain's hand stuck directly to him. Zoro was overwhelmed by the constant stabbings, and he barely blocked them by waving his three swords wildly while retreating. In just a few breaths, he retreated to the edge of the deck. At this moment, Gawain's attack slowed down, and Zoro just breathed a sigh of relief when he saw a silver-white light shooting out from Gawain's sword. He only had time to lower his head before the silver light flew away close to his scalp. Whoosh! A sea beast that was tens of meters in size had just jumped out of the water when it was cut into two pieces by Gawain's flying slash. Zoro looked back at the astonishing scene on the sea, swallowed his saliva, and said, "Is this something a swordsman can do?" Gawain smiled faintly. "There's even a powerful swordsman that can cut down a dragon in the sky. You want to learn? I'll teach you." Snort. The corners of Zoro's mouth curled up, looking extremely defiant. At this moment, he suddenly realized that joining the White Knight pirate was not a bad thing. At least, even when they are enemies, Gawain is willing to save him, which means that the other party is most likely not a vicious person. Moreover, having such a powerful opponent to feed his skills will only help him grow faster. He has confidence. It would take at most 3 years to reach Gawain's current level. I will use my own way to become the strongest. Chapter 62. He didn't want to win. After speaking, Zoro gripped the sword tightly in his hand, and the fire in his eyes burned more vigorously, but suddenly, Gawain's teasing voice came to his ears. "You're still a long way from there." The next moment, a hand pressed on Zoro's chest and gave it a gentle push. Zoro, who had already reached the edge of the deck, lost his balance and fell into the sea with the two swords in his hands. Thump! A splash of water rose from the sea. Ha 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 ha! Nami couldn't help but burst out of laughter before swiftly throwing a life buoy down from the deck. Asshole! Zoro clung to the life buoy, soaking wet. He looked at Gawain, who had a smile on his face on the deck, and gritted his teeth in anger. "Just you wait. Sooner or later, I will throw you into the sea." Gawain's expression remained unchanged, and he said calmly, "If you say so, then I have to have some fun in advance. Otherwise, I will be sorry for my future self. Although I never thought you could defeat me." Have some fun in advance? Zoro was stunned and suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. A few minutes later Zoro climbed onto the boat with difficulty, walked towards Gawain angrily, and was about to continue the battle, but suddenly, he felt his feet go weak. When he looked down, he discovered that the wounds on his chest and abdomen had split open at some point. The blood soaked his bandages and the stimulation of the seawater made him grimace in pain. "If you are injured, don't try to be stubborn. Heal your wound first." Gawain's voice came from the deck. "It will take about 10 days from here to my base. With your physical condition, you will recover in 3 days at most. It won't be too late to come back then." Snort. Zoro's mouth twitched in pain, but he also knew that what Gawain said was his best choice right now. What an arrogant fellow. He slowly put the sword back into the scabbard, and then he felt dizzy and fell on his back. The last thing he heard was Johnny and Yosaku's screams. The two men stepped forward and carefully examined Zoro's wounds. After confirming that the latter was only weak due to not eating for a few days, they felt relieved. Yosaku turned and looked at Gawain with a pleading look. "Mr. Gawain, look." After a few days of getting along, they had already seen clearly that Gawain in front of them was completely different from the other pirates. He does not have that kind of cruel style, and his whole demeanor is consistent with his White Knight nickname. As a result, the initial panic and anxiety gradually disappeared. "Take care of that guy first. Forget it, let the ship stop to rebandage it. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if the wound gets infected." "Thanks." Yosaku thanked profusely. Gawain waved his hand and asked the two men to carry Zoro into the cabin. Kuro brushed past the two men, walked onto the deck, and stood side by side with Gawain. He looked at the wound on Zoro's body and noticed the undisguised admiration in Gawain's eyes. "Do you think so highly of that little brat?" Gawain didn't even raise his eyelids and said calmly, "At least for now, his potential is the strongest on our ship, even better than mine." "Do you believe it? As long as he is guided correctly, within a few years, he will be able to defeat you." Kuro rolled his eyes at him. He wanted to open his mouth to refute directly, but his eyes caught a glimpse of Nami, who had just laid back in the chair and was drinking orange juice comfortably. So, he subconsciously closed his mouth. After all, the past events are still vivid in his mind. He washed all the socks of his companions for 1 month, making his life extremely miserable during that time. Thinking about it now, Kuro even shrugged his nose subconsciously. After confirming that there was no such smell on his body, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then he turned to look at Gawain and said, It's already great luck for the East Blue to produce a freak like Nami, who goes beyond common sense once every 10 years. Do you expect to meet one every day? Gawain was stunned and said jokingly, do you want to continue washing our socks? Roll. When his dark history was exposed, Kuro was immediately embarrassed. He turned around and left with a sullen face. Before entering the cabin, Kuro turned to Gawain and said, just watch. With your lazy attitude now, it won't be long before I surpass you. Bang. After Kuro finished speaking, he slammed the cabin door shut and walked towards the training room, only to find that Jin had already been inside, looking at him provocatively. This look seems familiar, as if he has seen it in the mirror. Kuro's heart skipped a beat. Gawain on the deck looked at Kuro's back and touched his nose with his hand. He smiles but says nothing. During this period, through fighting and training, Kuro and Jin contributed a lot of experience to him. Although it will still take some time to upgrade, who doesn't like the feeling of watching the experience bar grow longer? He likes energetic young people like them. With Nami joining the team in just a few days, his navigation skills have been upgraded by one level, reaching level 2. Far beyond the capabilities of a certain ambitious vice captain. After 3 days of rest, Zoro's wounds had completely healed. It was obvious that even in terms of physical ability alone, he was first-rate. After all, this was also proof of his great potential. And the first thing he did after recovering was to challenge Gawain. Instead of taking more effective measures, such as sneak attacks or drugging, he chose to attack head-on. This is his character. If he wants to win, he must win fairly. How can the title of the strongest person won by cheating be resounding throughout heaven? Now, everyone on the ship gathered on the deck to watch the battle. Kuro looked at Zoro and shook his head. In just a few days, no matter how fast you progress, there is a limit. Hasn't that kid figured out the gap between himself and Gawain? There is no hope for a frontal assault. After Jin pondered for a moment, he said calmly, maybe he didn't even want to win this time. Kuro was stunned, then turned around and looked at the field without saying a word. Gawain stood with a sword in his hand, his expression calm. Zoro was furious. Clang. The 3 swords were unsheathed at the same time, and Zoro took a stance. The aura emanating from him was visibly stronger than it was a few days ago. Wow, that's quite some progress. Gawain's eyes lit up. Could just one defeat lead to such growth? But after all, it was destined that the man who would take the title of the strongest swordsman from Hawkeye's would have such talent, so it was normal. Kuro, on the side, was dumbfounded at this moment. He was the second strongest person on the ship after Gawain, even Jin was a little bit inferior to him. Naturally, like Gawain, he could see the changes in Zoro. How much growth has it achieved in just a few days? No, these freaks really do gather in the East Blue, right? Wrong. He turned to look at Gawain, then at Jin and Nami, and finally kept his eyes on Zoro while frowning. Once is luck, twice is coincidence, and thrice is beyond common sense. Gawain seems to have the ability to recognize other people's talents. It's as if he can judge the other person's potential ability just by looking at him. How can he do it? Chapter 63, Captain, please give me your advice. After some fruitless thinking, Kuro could only temporarily attribute Gawain's ability to an instinct, a special perception ability similar to his observation haki. Maybe. Beyond the basic ability of observation haki, there are also various special derivative abilities. Kuro frowned. The battle in the distance has already begun. Zoro rushed forward quickly, and the 3 swords in his hands were like 3 swimming dragons, cutting through the air and slashing toward Gawain. The sharp momentum compared to a few days ago is not much different, but it is a rapid improvement. Interesting. Gawain curled up the corner of his mouth and instinctively stretched out the long sword in his hand, accurately finding the tiny flaw in Zoro's attack and then moving forward. Bang! The Guan's mass immune hit the sword in Zoro's mouth. The force from the blade instantly stopped Zoro's forward attack. Then, a familiar scene reappeared. Gawain's other hand bypassed Zoro's 2 swords and pressed directly into his chest. Realizing what was about to happen, Zoro's mouth twitched. This kind of thing is a bit of a bad taste no matter how you think about it, right? I think it's very interesting. Damn it. With Zoro's impotent rage, Gawain gave him a slight push, and he fell into the water again. Thump. As soon as Zoro fell into the water, a life buoy hit his head. He hurriedly hugged the life buoy, and when he looked up, he saw a slightly playful face. How can you be a match for Captain Gawain? Newcomer. Nami smiled mischievously, but what she said was the truth in her heart. Then Nami took out a small blackboard from her side, and in front of Zoro, she erased the original one and wrote it too. Zoro. You're being a little rude. After the simple farce, Zoro climbed onto the boat nimbly, glanced at Nami unconsciously, and then turned to look at Gawain, again. Good. Gawain responded calmly. The third round of battle begins. But just a few seconds later, the familiar scene reappeared, and this time, Zoro didn't even react to what was happening. Nami silently changed the number on the blackboard to 3. A few minutes later, Zoro climbed onto the boat again and rushed towards Gawain without hesitation, although his body was a little exhausted from falling into the water repeatedly. But since Kuina's death, he had never felt such a desire to surpass an opponent like this. Even though his body feels heavy, the burning fire in his heart is getting stronger and stronger, and it will not stop until everything he has is burned out. Again. Sensing Zoro's change, Gawain said seriously, "Zoro, if you think you can do it, try it. I will always be at the front, waiting for your challenge, and I will never fall before that." Zoro clenched the 2 swords in his hands so tightly that veins popped out on the back of his hands and only uttered one word, "Good." The next moment, the blades collided, and their eyes met, and they both saw the recognition in each other's eyes. The battle between the two continued until the next night. The number on Nami's small blackboard was close to 4 digits before Zoro fell down due to exhaustion. But Zoro's eyes were hotter than ever before. "Hey, Gawain, I have a reason to be the best in the world." Zoro covered his eyes with his arms. The cold moonlight shone on his face, making it impossible to see his expression. Only from Gawain's perspective could one see that the corners of Zoro's eyes were wet, but it was not sweat or seawater. Gawain looked at this scene and said calmly, "I didn't have a reason, but now I do. As a captain, I cannot be underestimated by my own companion, especially when my companion is leaving after winning. I cannot lose." Zoro was stunned for a moment, and after a few breaths, he shouted loudly, "Captain, please give me your guidance. Don't you want to try again? After all, there are still several days until the time we agreed on." "That's not necessary." Zoro shook his head. He simply lay on the deck in a spread eagle position, his chest heaving, and he felt like he didn't have the strength to move a finger. After fighting from day to night, he was defeated by Gawain countless times, fell into the sea, and stood up countless times. His body had already reached its limit. A strong swordsman can sense the outcome of a battle the moment their eyes meet. For you, this level is not even a battle. I already recognize you. Clang. Gawain slowly put Guan's masamune into the scabbard with a faint smile on his face. "Then don't die before you surpass me." "Certainly. The battle ends here." Apart from the pirates who could no longer hold on and return to the cabin to rest, the only ones left on the deck were Jin, Kuro, and the duo, Yozaku, and Johnny. Has Zoro become a pirate? Then we. Yozaku was confused for a moment, and so did Johnny, who was beside him. Suddenly, Gawain's voice came to their ears, "Would you two like to board my ship with Zoro?" "Yes." The two of them stood up straight suddenly and said excitedly, "Captain Gawain." Gawain nodded, then ignored everyone on the deck and walked into the cabin. Kuro and Jin stood side by side, watching the scene expressionlessly, but their attention was inevitably drawn to Zoro, with only uncontrollable shock in their eyes. To be able to do this kid's willpower is simply iron. Jin exclaimed, "No wonder Gawain thinks so highly of him. This strong spirit alone is enough to ensure that he will go further than others. You're only seeing the surface." Kuro took a deep puff of the cigarette in his mouth, and his tone was somewhat solemn. "From last night to now, this kid's swordsmanship has improved by at least 30%. Even with Gawain's guidance, this rate of progress is already a freakish one. Aren't you still thinking about surpassing me and becoming the deputy captain? Don't let this little brat overtake you before you overtake me. That would be really fun." Jin's pupils shrank, and he felt an inexplicable sense of urgency in his heart, but he still pretended to be calm and turned to look at Kuro. "What about you?" "I?" Kuro shook off the cigarette ash from his fingertips and smiled calmly. "There is an unbridgeable gap between him and me." "Yeah?" Jin gritted his teeth and secretly vowed in his heart to double the amount of training tonight, but what he said was, "Me too. But tonight, I don't need to pay attention to this farce, and I can get a good night's sleep." "Who says it's not?" The two looked at each other with fake smiles on their faces, then turned around at the same time and entered the cabin. After watching each other enter their rooms, they both breathed a sigh of relief. A few minutes later, Kuro changed into casual clothes and just walked into the training room. Then he saw Jin, who had already started lifting weights, making his expression freeze. What a coincidence. Jin's face turned red. Yeah, what a coincidence. Chapter 64, Competition. Early the next morning, Kuro and Jin dragged their almost exhausted bodies and limped out of the training room. The dark circles under their eyes and their shaking legs showed how brutal their training had been last night. "Oh, you have no strength left?" Kuro struggled to stand up, his back straight as if nothing had happened, and then he turned his head to glance at Jin, who was almost unable to get up. The latter gritted his teeth and choked back, "For me, this level is not even a warm-up." If your legs didn't shake when you spoke, you might be more convincing. TSK. Kuro curled his lips, not mentioning that his whole body was in great pain, and he didn't even have the strength to raise his hands. Jin said disdainfully, "You should take care of yourself first." "Oh, really?" Kuro forced himself to suppress his trembling legs and said calmly, "It seems you still have some strength left. I suddenly want to go back and do 2 more sets of bench presses." Jin did not give in. "Come on." Suddenly, a familiar voice appeared in their ears. "Is this the place on the ship dedicated to training?" After a full night's rest, Zoro, who had fully recovered his energy, now looked energetic. Especially when he learned that there was a room specifically for training on such a small pirate ship, he was extremely surprised and rushed over as soon as possible. After all, what could be more important than training for him, who aspires to become the world's strongest swordsman? Kuro looked at the newcomer in front of him, then thinking of the talent he had shown last night, he complained in his heart, after being brutally tortured by Gawain for a whole day and night, "You didn't take a break to relax? So hard. Could it be that he is coming for Jin, or even him?" Thinking of this, Kuro silently turned his head and looked at Jin beside him. They both saw the fear in each other's eyes. "Don't let this little brat look down on you." Then, Kuro pretended to be relaxed and said to Zoro, "That's right. However, young people should pay attention to combining work and rest, and don't hurt your foundation bang." Before Kuro finished speaking, he saw that Zoro had already installed a 30-kilogram weight plate on one end of the barbell. Zoro held the other end of the dumbbell with one hand, felt the weight, curled his lips slightly in dissatisfaction, and added another piece. Bang! Kuro's liver shuddered, and he hadn't reacted yet. Jin, on the side, had already quietly returned to the training room, picked up the sweat-soaked barbell again, gritted his teeth and doubled the already exaggerated weight, then started training desperately with his face flushed red. For a while, Kuro, who was about to leave, suddenly couldn't move forward. Jin was staring at his position, but he was not as talented as him, so his growth rate naturally could not catch up with him. But the key was this newcomer. Kuro suddenly remembered what Gawain had said the previous day and had a bad feeling. If a newcomer really gets on his head in a few years, that would be really troublesome, and he would never be able to raise his head on the ship again in his life. Given that bastard's bad character, he will laugh at him for a few years for what happened. Thinking of this, Kuro gasped. How can he let these bastards get stronger without him knowing? Kuro bit his lip and returned to the training room. He silently picked up his training equipment and doubled the load. Huh? Zoro raised a brow. He naturally felt the strange atmosphere in the room. Especially Kuro and Jin, who had been training all night and were obviously ready to leave. But when they saw him coming, they returned to the training room. What's this? Is this a show of their strength? Interesting. But I'm not a pushover. The corners of his mouth gradually widened, and his eyes lit up again. 2 30-kilogram weight plates were added to the barbell, which was originally just the right size. Zoro had to use all his strength to barely swing it. Whoosh! The barbells whistled, creating fierce in the room. The veins on Zoro's arms bulged, and he kept shaking, but he still maintained a calm demeanor. Then he turned to look at Kuro and Jin. If you are tired, go back and rest early. If you are too stubborn, you will only hurt your body. After all, you are not young anymore. The two of them frowned and said word by word, not young anymore? Arrogant little brat. The corner of Kuro's mouth twitched. I'll let you know the authority of the deputy captain. Jin, you don't want to be looked down upon by the newcomers, do you? That's enough for the warm-up. Show us your true strength. Double the weight. Jin's eyelids jumped. The original weight made his body tremble, and he was on the verge of limit. Adding on additional weight. It was like putting his life in danger. But when he noticed Zoro's provocative look, he couldn't bring himself to give up. After all, if this newcomer really wants to surpass others, Zoro should surpass him first. I'll follow. Hey! Zoro sneered and thought to himself, has the war to determine the ranking within the ship begun so soon? As expected, even among comrades, there is competition, but how can he lose to others before defeating that guy? I'll follow, too. 10 minutes later. The constipated voices of 3 men were heard from the training room, causing the passing pirates to look inside frequently. Nami was also attracted by the sound in the cabin. Seeing the ridiculous weights carried by the 3 people, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. No matter how strong a man's desire to win is, they shouldn't use it in such a mess, right? Big sister Nami, you don't understand, this is the passion between men. Several pirates quietly came over and whispered in Nami's ear. Nami put her hand on her forehead, this is too much of a mess. She wanted to go and tell Gawain about this, but when she thought of the 3 people's extraordinary physiques, she gave up the plan and turned around and walked towards the room. Now, under Gawain's authorization, She has taken over the entire pirate crew's navigation work. Not only in this ship but also the Nyaban brothers and Django, who are responsible for guarding Raven Harbor, will come to consult her in the future. In just half a month, Nami has already won everyone on the ship's recognition. The trust of her companions is both a motivation and a responsibility, urging her to keep improving. Looking at the nautical chart on the table, Nami opened the porthole and let the sea breeze blow in. The windmills whirred. Her heart was more peaceful than ever before. She raised her hand, plucked an orange from the tree that Nojiko had given her, peeled it, and put it into her mouth. At night, except for the people who were responsible for night watch and navigation, most of the people on the ship had already gone to bed. Even the 3 in the training room were completely exhausted and fell down on the spot. Not long after, there were bursts of snoring sounds. Nami passed by the training room and looked at the 3 sleeping people with a little disdain. Really? They are already grown-ups, but they still act like a child. After saying that, Nami turned around, took out 3 blankets, put them on the 3 people, then quietly closed the door and left. Chapter 65. The strength of gold level leaks inside the captain's cabin. Gawain opened the system panel as usual to take stock of today's gains. This has become a routine he must do before going to bed every day. After all, he can just lie down and do nothing and watch his experience bar skyrocket and his strength improves. Is there anything more satisfying than this? But the news he heard shocked him greatly. Physique experience plus 233. Swordsmanship experience plus 408. Pussyfoot maneuver experience plus 40. Observation hockey experience plus 84. How much has the swordsmanship increased? Gawain rubbed his eyes, and after confirming the number, he still couldn't help being surprised. Nowadays, the benefits brought by swordsmanship practice by the pirate crews are very small, with only a few points of experience every day, or even nothing at all. In other words, these 400 points of swordsmanship experience were basically provided by Zoro, and nearly half of the physique experience also came from Zoro. If Zoro had been under Gawain's command when he first woke up, a month would have been enough time for him to improve his swordsmanship to its current level. No, it is far beyond his current strength. The experience points provided by Zoro, when converted proportionally, are almost 4 times that of silver-level Crone. Although the gap is not as big as that between iron and bronze, it is basically similar to the gap between bronze and silver. Is this the speed of a gold-level potential? Gawain couldn't help but let out an exclamation of admiration, and at the same time, he became more covetous of the other gold-level potential crew members in the East Blue. Ace would not be considered for the time being. After all, if a real fight broke out between them, he, who hadn't yet mastered the armament hockey, the final result would be no different from that battle between him and Smoker. The Logia fruit has a strange mechanism, and there is really no solution unless there is a countermeasure. I'm going to get a devil fruit sooner or later. I'm not picky about special Paramsha and Logia devil fruit, but Mythical Zone is definitely better. Gawain, who is familiar with the original plot, naturally knows that among the vast number of devil fruits, only the Mythical Zone is the version answer. With a beast form, plus their special abilities, eating a Mythical Zone fruit is almost equivalent to eating a Paramsha and Zone fruit at the same time. But, what kind of devil fruit he can get depends on luck. Most of the powerful elemental abilities imaginable in the Logia fruit have already been taken. There are many legendary creatures among the mythical beasts that have never appeared, but they are the rarest devil fruit in themselves. It is very difficult to find one, and there is no room for selection. This thing mainly depends on fate, but swordsmanship and physical strength are something I can master now. If I develop these 2 to the extreme, I will be qualified to reach the top. After all, even the king of the pirates, Gul D. Roger, and one of the 4 emperors, Red Hair Shanks, did not rely on devil fruits to reach the top. Thinking of this, Gawain shook off the distracting thoughts in his mind and focused all his attention on the panel in front of him. The swordsmanship that was about to be upgraded, along with the swordsmanship experience provided by Zoro, directly broke through and reached level 6. After a few seconds, countless experiences related to swordsmanship flooded into his mind. He just felt his fingers itching and instinctively wanted to swing the sword. Gawain walked quickly out of the cabin and onto the deck. He drew out his sword and used all the updated sword moves in his mind one by one. For a moment, the deck was filled with the shining lights of silver swords and a figure of Gawain dancing with a sword. Whoosh! 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 The sound of countless slashes cutting through the air echoed on the deck, and the blades refracted the moonlight, leaving mottled projections all around. The moves, which were already concise enough, had many variations and were slowly streamlined and integrated with Gawain's original sword system. Different from his previous extremely sharp sword skills, this time, Gawain's moves had a different kind of beauty. But it is just as swift and deadly. Nami, who had just returned to the room, looked through the window at the figure dancing with the sword and was stunned for a moment. Even the captain is training at a time like this? Who told me that the captain does not train at all? I really want to slap him in the face with this scene. Sure enough, those animals who can easily get full marks are just working hard when you don't know. Of course, their efforts may only take 10 minutes to make it comparable to other whole days' work. Oh. Nami's mouth twitched, and she simply closed the porthole, believing that out of sight, out of mind. Only at this moment she couldn't help but think of Kuro, who was ambitious and wanted to defeat Gawain and take the throne. Although she could see that Kuro was extremely in agreement with Gawain, in this situation, those who are stronger than you are still stronger than you. Mr. Kuro. You'd better give up. Nami shook her head, and after a few seconds of silence for Kuro, she lowered her head and turned her attention to the nautical chart in her hand. The candlelight flickered, reflecting Nami's serious face. The flash of swords on the deck continued until dawn when the clouds in the distance took on a fiery texture and emitted rays of light, only then did it stop. Gawain was sweating all over, but he didn't feel tired at all. The sword in his hand made a buzzing sound at his moment as if it had sensed the changes in its master and was exuding excitement. Did you feel it, too? As I become stronger, you will be able to drink the blood of more powerful people. Even. No, I must challenge the man standing at the top. Gawain stood quietly on the deck facing the rising sun. The sea breeze blew across his face, lifting the loose hair on his forehead, revealing a handsome face and eyes as dazzling as the sun. Gawain stood at the bow for a few minutes, then turned back to the cabin. Just when he was looking forward to how much profit he could make tonight, bad news reached Gawain's ears. Kuro and the other two suffered muscle strains due to excessive training. Jin even urinated blood. He will probably have to spend the next few days lying in bed. Naturally, there is no experience. Gawain helplessly showed a constipated expression. No, why? Raven Harbor, in the Lord's mansion. Gaza looked at the beautiful girl in the mirror and was a little dazed for a moment. This is... me? There was a note of disbelief in her tone. Even Jasmine, who was standing next to Gaza and holding a mirror, was stunned when she saw Gaza's appearance changed drastically. Gaza's appearance was not outstanding originally, but now, in front of Jasmine, was a girl with a beautiful appearance and an extremely slim figure. Especially the girl's skin, which is not only white but also has a moist luster. At a glance, you can tell that the skin must be extremely smooth. Combined with Gaza's already outstanding temperament, Jasmine even felt at this moment that even Pirate Empress Boa Hancock, whom she had seen in the newspaper, was only at this level. After a few seconds, Jasmine came back to her senses and nodded heavily. Miss, that's you. Is this the effect of the devil fruit? Gaza raised her hand and gently stroked her face, then turned to look at another devil fruit on the table and murmured, Do you think Mr. Gawain will need this thing? Chapter 66. Verity. Jasmine was slightly stunned when she realized what Gaza was thinking and said hurriedly, My lord. This is a treasure that your father spent hundreds of millions of belly to buy from the Grand Line. Well. Gaza smiles playfully, anyway, one person can only eat one devil fruit. Since my father gave it to me, I naturally have the right to dispose of it. I can't offer any help to Mr. Gawain, who is about to enter the Grand Line, but this devil fruit is different. Jasmine held her forehead with her hand, feeling a headache. She couldn't help but feel a little resentful towards Gawain. Originally, before they met Gawain, Gaza was, in her mind, an almost perfect lord except for her ordinary appearance. Brave, wise, knowledgeable, and kind, you can see in her all the qualities required in aristocratic etiquette classes. It has only been a few years since she took over the harbor, but she has already gained everyone's respect. If things continue to develop in this way, it is possible for her to compete with her brothers for the right of inheritance. But after meeting Gawain, Gaza seemed to be possessed. Isn't he just a pretty boy who is good-looking, capable, and a little gentle? All right. It sounds attractive. Jasmine recalled Gawain's face, which looked like a Prince Charming who walked out of a storybook and said weakly, Miss, before we found the devil fruit encyclopedia to compare it, we didn't even know its name. Have you ever thought about if it is a devil fruit that they can use? That's right. Gaza was stunned. Then let's wait until we are sure what devil fruit this is before handing it over to Mr. Gawain. I heard from Django and the others that it will take some time before Mr. Gawain sets sail. Jasmine nodded repeatedly, not wanting to dwell on this topic any longer, and turned around to talk about the news she had heard at the harbor. By the way, I heard that the ocean-going restaurant, Verity, will arrive at Raven Harbor tomorrow and stay here for 3 days. Gaza's eye lights up. That restaurant with the highest rating in East Blue? Then we'll go there tomorrow. The next day, at nightfall. The lights in Raven Harbor are bright. Along the harbor is a row of ship shops, selling goods from all over the East Blue and even on the Grand Line. People were coming and going in the harbor, and everyone had already recovered from the previous war. Now that Raven Harbor is under the protection of the White Knight pirate, the surrounding waterways are becoming safer and more prosperous than ever before. The most eye-catching among all the shops is undoubtedly the restaurant in the middle, a boat shaped like a big fish. Verity. Gaza slowly read out the name of the restaurant. Several guards followed her, keeping a watchful eye on the people around them, but they still couldn't help but sniffle because the aroma coming from the restaurant was so fragrant. Just smelling it once makes it hard to forget. Soon, a young man, about 16 or 17 years old, with short blonde hair, a handsome appearance, and gentlemanly manners, walked quickly toward Gaza. The young man was none other than Sanji, who was currently learning cooking at the Verity. The moment he saw Gaza, Sanji's heart skipped a beat. He quickly walked up to Gaza and bowed like a gentleman. "Ma'am, please come this way. I will provide you with the best service." "Thanks." After thanking him, Gaza followed Sanji into the restaurant. A few minutes later, on the second-floor observation deck, Sanji diligently poured red wine for Gaza with graceful movements, but his eyes kept glancing at Gaza, and his breathing became heavier. Gaza's attention was drawn to a bounty posted on the wall. "White Knight Gawain, a bounty of 85 million belly? Has the bounty on Mr. Gawain increased again?" A smile unconsciously appeared on Gaza's face. During this time, she has came to understand that bounty can largely reflect the threat posed by a pirate and is also a proof of strength. The increase in Gawain's bounty undoubtedly shows that the Marines attach more importance to him, and his reputation directly overshadows all the pirates in East Blue. Gaza couldn't help but narrow her eyes. Jasmine nodded. "Miss, don't you know yet? This happened over a month ago. Ever since the battle at Raven Harbor subsided, Mr. Gawain's bounty has been raised to this level." After speaking, Jasmine paused for a moment, and then she noticed that Gaza's eyes were full of fatigue. She felt an indescribable pain in her heart. "Now that things in the harbor have returned to normal, it's time for you to take a break." Gaza smiled and shook her head. "Mr. Gawain is moving towards his dream. I can't lose to him. At least I must make this the most prosperous harbor in the East Blue." While the two girls were talking, they didn't notice that Sanji had already stopped what he was doing. He lowered his face, making them unable to see his expression clearly, and waited until the two girls' voices gradually died down before he spoke. "Ladies, I advise you not to worship that guy. After all, he is a bastard who abandoned his beloved princess and lived alone. I will never accept such a person having the title of loyal knight." Hearing the undisguised anger in Sanji's tone, Gaza frowned slightly. "If it was the man I knew who was willing to fight Admiral Krieg's fleet alone for the civilians of Raven Harbor, he would never do such a thing." Sanji gritted his teeth and said in a voice that was almost a roar, "You don't know yet? Less than 3 months after that man set sail, Princess Guinevere was executed." Gaza was stunned. Just as she was about to speak a few words to defend Gawain, a deep voice came to her ears. "Sanji. You scared the two guests." The two girls turned around and saw an old man wearing an extra-long chef's hat and with a disabled leg frowning at Sanji. "You bastard, do you remember what I told you? You must never be so rude to women." Seeing Sanji lowering his head in shame, Zeph turned to Gaza and explained, "Please understand that Princess Guinevere has a special meaning to this little brat. After all..." "Asshole boss." Sanji interrupted Zeph and turned around, then was kicked into the sea by Zeph. Thump. The water surfaced splashed, attracting the attention of people around. Zeph then turned to Gaza and apologized. "I'm so sorry, your consumption tonight is free." "No need." Gaza's face turned cold. At this point, she had no appetite for dinner. She turned around and left with Jasmine and the guards. On the street, Sanji, who had just climbed out of the water, looked at Gaza, who was leaving quickly, silently lit a cigarette for himself, and stood alone for a long time before walking back into the Verity while murmuring, "It seems that I am also not worthy of the title of a knight." At the same time, somewhere in East Blue, the members of the White Knight Pirate were sitting on the deck, watching the movie that Nami was playing on the projector. Den Den Mushi. The charming princess falls in love with the loyal knight. Chapter 67, Live, my knight. "No, don't tell me. This thing is more interesting than I thought. It's just that the actor they found doesn't really match the captain. Is this the captain's past experience? It was directly made into a movie. It's so legendary that it's unparalleled. The princess is so beautiful. This actress is no good. I saw the princess's real photo in the newspaper. She is 10 times more beautiful than her. Hiss. The captain is so lucky." Everyone watched and commented and even looked at Gawain mischievously from time to time. Seeing that he had a sullen face and said nothing, they immediately became happier. "No, what's the point of this kind of thing?" The veins on Gawain's forehead were throbbing. Zoro, Kuro, and Jin were seriously injured. Even with the help of the badge, It will take 2 or 3 days for them to recover. He can't gain experience during this time. So, he thought about holding a party so that everyone could relax. Who knew that Nami suddenly suggested showing everyone a movie, and he agreed without thinking too much. It turns out that this bastard is waiting here. Logically speaking, he could have just run away, but these bastards locked the cabin door and insisted on doing this. He can't just jump into the sea, right? Gawain turned his head and took a look at the lifebuoy that had been put away long ago. He immediately gave up the idea and could only let them do whatever they wanted. He got goosebumps all over his body out of embarrassment, and now he was feeling regretful, extremely regretful. Amid the laughter of the crowd, Gawain felt that the seconds passing by were like years. He finally managed to hold on until the end of the movie. The crowd gradually dispersed, and the deck became deserted. Only then did Gawain breathe a sigh of relief. Nami suddenly walked up to him and asked mischievously, "Captain, what is the past between you and Princess Guinevere? Is it really like in the movies?" Gawain thought about it and realized that with this crappy movie, the things left behind by his predecessor would only become more and more outrageous, so he might as well take the initiative to explain it himself. After a brief recollection, he said, "I can no longer remember her woman's face. I only remember the last order she gave me. She said, 'I want you to live well and live at all costs because only when you are alive, there is hope.' She also said, 'She is the most favored princess. Even the king won't do anything to her.'" Nami was stunned and subconsciously clenched her sleeves. "Then what?" Gawain paused and continued, "I believe it. She fled with her men, and 3 months later, I heard the news that she had been executed. A year ago, I led my men to the kingdom of Goa for revenge, but the king who ordered her execution died of illness a few days before I started the action, and the prince named Steri inherited the throne. That's about it." Gawain was slightly stunned when he said this. "What's wrong with you?" Nami's eyes were already red, and she bit her lips tightly, looking like she was about to cry. "Captain, I'm sorry, I didn't know your past would be like this. You." The next second, Nami burst into tears, as big as pins rolling down her eyes. She was so moved that Gawain was in a state of panic. The soul of his previous life had long dissipated, and Gawain had no special feelings for that woman. If he had any, it was gratitude. After all, if she hadn't saved his predecessor, he wouldn't have had the chance to come here. But Nami obviously didn't think so. "The princess is so pitiful." Gawain was a little overwhelmed and subconsciously spoke to comfort her, "It's all in the past." Nami nodded heavily and rubbed her eyes. "From now on, you have me, Deputy Captain Kuro, Jin, and the newcomer, Zoro. We'll keep you company." Gawain was stunned and reached out to touch Nami's head, with something else in his mind. How could I possibly fall before I found my treasure? Gawain thought of Gaiman's question that day and then looked at Nami in front of him. He seemed to have found his answer. Gawain's subsequent voyage was smooth sailing. After recovering their energy, Kuro and the others started training again. With the previous lessons learned, the 3 of them restrained themselves this time, but not much. At most, they managed to stay in a state where they would be able to get up the next day. Zoro, who had just joined the group, felt that he seemed to have endless energy. In the past, he could only practice for 12 hours before collapsing due to exhaustion. Now, with the training volume almost doubled, he can maintain a similar length of time. After some fruitless thinking, he simply attributed it all to his extraordinary talent. Now, in the training room, Zoro felt the changes in his body, and the corners of his mouth gradually curled up. "Now it seems that it may take me less than 3 years to reach Gawain's level." Kuro glanced at him and said calmly, "You're still a long way from there. That guy wasn't serious in his fight with you. He didn't use either his pussyfoot maneuver or his observation hockey." Pussyfoot maneuver? Observation hockey? Zoro was slightly stunned when he heard the new term from Kuro, but there was no sign of discouragement on his face. After all, he is known as the #1 swordsman in the East Blue. How can he do this without great strength? Only people like this are worthy of making me stay here. Snort. Kuro snorted coldly, "Arrogant little brat. Old guy, aren't you just waiting to be surpassed by the newcomer?" Zoro did not give in. During the few days they spent together, although they often bickered, their relationship became much closer. They have a great recognition of each other's will. At the side, Jin looked at the 2 people bickering and continued his training silently. These days, he trains with Kuro and Zoro, so it is not difficult for him to feel that his progress is far slower than theirs. Especially compared to Zoro, at his current growth rate, he will be able to catch up with him in a few months. This also gave him an inexplicable sense of urgency. He didn't want to be like Django, the Nyaban brothers, and other companions, who had to stay in the East Blue because they couldn't keep up with Gawain's pace. The experiences during this period were not many, but they touched him far more than following Krieg for several years. This man is different, He wants to be his right-hand man. Thinking of this, Jin gritted his teeth and practiced even more rigorously than Zoro. The three of them chased each other. In the end, Gawain naturally benefited from it. When the pirate ship arrived at Pala Island, his swordsmanship and physique had improved by 1 level, reaching level 7 and level 8, respectively. Even Pussyfoot Maneuver has gone a step further and upgraded to level 4. As long as he upgrades 1 more level, he will be able to awaken exclusive features like in the physique and swordsmanship. The Pussyfoot Maneuver, which specializes in speed, will inevitably bring speed-related entries. Gawain is very much looking forward to this. Chapter 68, Flash Step. A few days later, at Pala Island. It was almost dusk, the setting sun was shining obliquely, and the red glow made the whole harbor sparkle. The busy people came and went, and all of them had smiles on their faces that were not like those of pirates because this period of time was the most comfortable time they had ever had since they went to sea. Some people even cultivated fields on the land of Pala Island and planted wheat, vegetables, and fruits. Relaxed, pure, and comfortable. There is no need to run around for survival, compete with colleagues for food on the edge of a sword, or face the fearful eyes of civilians. This kind of life can only be lived by following Captain Gawain. A pirate was leaning against the fence of the harbor with a cigarette in his mouth while chatting casually with his companions beside him. Who says it's not? I have had 5 previous captains. Those who could be called my friends either died in battle or at the hands of my captains. Only Captain Gawain was different. He cared about the lives of people like us. After speaking, the pirate suddenly raised his head and looked at the sea level in the distance. Then, a familiar pirate flag slowly emerged, and then a small sailboat gradually merged into the harbor. Captain Gawain is back. As the sound landed, the pirates who were still in the harbor flocked in to greet their most respected captain. On deck, Zoro looked up at the harbor, and his eyes were instantly attracted by the smiles on everyone's faces. He can naturally distinguish what is true and what is false. Different from those smiles that were deliberately faked to please the captain, the smiles on the faces of the pirates in the harbor at this moment were genuine. And there was only one person on the boat who could make them show such expressions. Yeah. Zoro looked back at Gawain, his mouth slightly curled. It seems I'm on a pretty good ship. Nami glanced at him, and a smile unconsciously appeared on the corner of her mouth, revealing an expression of tolerance. Isn't it natural for the captain to have such prestige? You still have a lot to learn, newbie with green algae hair. Hearing Nami's deliberate emphasis on the word newbie, Zoro's forehead veins throbbed. You just joined the group a few days earlier than me, so are you still considered a senior crew? A few days early still makes me a senior crew than you. Nami made a face at him. Zoro's face froze, and he felt more and more that women were creatures that would only affect his practice of swordsmanship. You really make me angry. Just as Nami was about to continue speaking, she felt a warm hand on her head, rubbing it hard. The same is true for Zoro on the other side. It stopped the two from arguing, and Gawain said calmly after looking at them, "All right. Now, let's go home." The ship dropped the anchor in the harbor, and after it stopped steadily, the gangway was lowered. Gawain, surrounded by a group of pirates, slowly walked to the back of the harbor. Today, the Nyaban brothers are still patrolling near Raven Harbor, fighting off pirates roaming the nearby waters. Only Django remains guarding the harbor. After Gawain briefly understood the situation, he no longer paid attention to it and directly ordered people to light a fire in the center of the harbor. As a banquet was held, Nami and Zoro, who were originally a little unfamiliar with everyone, gradually became familiar with them. The next day, Gawain sat at his desk, thinking about his next move. To enter the Grand Line, the first priority is building a ship. With the money obtained from Arlong, they can build a pirate ship capable of sailing in the New World. After all, even the total cost of the 1,000 Sunny, which has a variety of functions, is only 200 million, excluding the private goods and keel that Frankie brought in. If he builds a ship at 10 times the price, would it still sink? Gawain sneered in his heart. The only thing he's worried about is the technical level of the ship, right? And he can only ask Gaza for help with that. She is a noble from the East Blue and manages a harbor. Even if the shipbuilders under her are not as good as Frankie's, they should be of a certain level. Another thing is to recruit Sanji, the gold-level seed from East Blue, before entering the Grand Line. However, he was still an apprentice at the Barity at the time, and his whereabouts were unknown. He heard that Barity had arrived at Raven Harbor a few days ago, but it seemed that Sanji had some conflicts with Gaza, and Barity left the next day. I can only let the Nyaban brothers pay attention to this matter first. Once they find it, we can just track it, but it will take some time to locate it. I can also take this opportunity to gain some experience from Zoro and the others and see if I can raise my rating to silver before entering the Grand Line. Bronze level combat power is more than enough in the East Blue, but it's still a little lacking when it comes to the Grand Line. As for the armament hockey. When mentioning armament hockey, Gawain frowned slightly. During this period of time, as he explored on his own, he gradually figured out some of the tricks, but he always felt that he was missing something that was the most crucial. Everyone has a mysterious power in their body, but ordinary people may not be able to awaken it even if they spend their entire lives. But how should I do this step? I have tried everything I could. The only thing I haven't tried is fighting. A battle in which we are evenly matched, or even in which my opponent is much stronger than me. But there are no such opponents in the East Blue right now. Do I have to wait until I enter the Grand Line? Gawain sighed, and when he turned around and saw the scene outside the window, a smile unconsciously appeared on the corner of his mouth. In the harbor, 3 figures holding barbells have already started their training for the day and have even attracted a large number of followers. Everyone worked out under the scorching sun, sweating and enjoying the pleasure of their bodies becoming gradually stronger. A slight smile appeared on Gawain's lips. This is the qualified cultivation of a leek. After speaking, Gawain poured himself a cup of coffee, tasting the sour taste mixed with the aroma of milk. Huh. What a sin. Gawain let out a sigh of relief. He finally understands why the boss likes to let employees work overtime so much. How can he describe the feeling of watching others working hard for him? That's right, the life of a capitalist is so simple and unpretentious. Kuro, who had already awakened his observation hockey, naturally noticed that Gawain was looking at him. Feeling his body gradually getting hot, Kuro sneered in his heart, "That bastard is so lazy, it won't be long before I become the captain." Time flies, and more than a month has passed. The Nayab brothers were still searching aimlessly for the ocean-going restaurant, Verity, but they were always one step behind, and they still had to patrol near Raven Harbor. Gaza had already helped Gawain contact the shipyard, and according to Gawain's budget, they had produced a design drawing, and they could start construction as soon as the treasure tree atom, which would serve as the keel, arrived. At nightfall, the sea breeze blows into the cabin. The system prompt sound came to Gawain's ears again. Physique experience plus 246. Swordsmanship experience plus 411. Pussyfoot maneuver experience plus 51. Observation hockey experience plus 82. With another wave of experience coming in, Gawain's long-awaited skill, Pussyfoot maneuver, finally saw a breakthrough. Pussyfoot maneuver, level 4, 1587 1600, greater than Pussyfoot maneuver, level 5, 38 2500. The next moment, the familiar prompt sound appeared in Gawain's mind again. The level 5 Pussyfoot maneuver brought Gawain a new branch of ability. The difference is that this time, there is only one branch. It is detected that the host's Pussyfoot maneuver has been improved to level 5, unlocking a new feature, Flash Step. Chapter 69, Silver Flash Step? Is there only one option? Different skills have different ranges of advancement? Gawain had a vague guess, and then he focused his attention on the newly added feature. Just from the name, it was not difficult to tell that Flash Step should be an instant acceleration boost. How about trying its power? Gawain stood up, jumped out of the window, and landed on the open space in the middle. When landing, the Guan's masamune on Gawain's waist was already unsheathed, and the silver blade was extremely dazzling under the moonlight. He took a step forward and instantly launched a Pussyfoot maneuver. Before he could react, his body appeared dozens of meters away. Bang! With an abrupt stop, Gawain crushed into the stone slabs in the harbor, and the cracks spread out in all directions with himself as the center. But at this moment, Gawain didn't care about all this because he was now facing the same problem Kuro had once faced. His nerve reflex speed can no longer keep up with the speed after the bonus of Flash Step. What the hell? The instantaneous burst speed must be at least twice as fast as Pussyfoot maneuver's normal speed to exceed my nerve reflex speed. This feature is so outrageous. Gawain looked at the cracks under his feet and then looked back at the place where he had just stood. If it weren't for the pain in his feet due to the recoil, he would have doubted whether he was dreaming. Gawain forced himself to suppress the thoughts in his mind, activated his observation hockey, and tried his best to sense everything around him. The next moment, his figure disappeared from the air, and the only sound in the harbor was the constant sounds of the floor breaking and a burst of explosions. Bang! 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 By the time Gawain stopped, there was no intact stone slab left at the place where Kuro and the others had practiced during the day. He stood there in a daze and didn't continue because his legs were shaking constantly at this time. That was a phenomenon that only occurred when the muscles were overexerted. At this moment, Gawain even felt that these legs were not his own. But there was only excitement in his eyes. The instantaneous burst speed bonus of Flash Step is far more exaggerated than I expected. It makes the Pussyfoot maneuver close to nearly 3 times faster. However, consistent with my initial speculation, This is a high-speed, short-distance attack method, which instantly bursts out at speed more than 2 times, but the cost is a greater burden on the body. In this case, with the sharpness of Guan's mass immune and my swordsmanship. If the opponent does not have observation hockey or other means of saving his life, I'm almost 100% certain to kill him on the first clash. This feature is a qualitative change for me. My previous upgrades in swordsmanship, physique, and observation hockey didn't allow me to reach the silver rating, but now there's hope. While speaking, Gawain opened the system panel directly, and a familiar screen appeared in front of him again. Host, Gawain, age, 24, identity, Captain of the White Knight Pirate, skill, swordsmanship, level 9, 148 7000, feature, swiftness physique, level 9, 1613 5000, feature, equilibrium pussyfoot maneuver, level 5, 11 5000, feature, flash step observation hockey, level 3, 376 3200, navigation, level 3, 301 800, badge, Captain's Fury, subordinates physical strength recovery speed plus 20%. Rising fame, you can check the potential level of your subordinates. Rating, even on the Grand Line, you are a powerful force. If the Marines want to take action against you, they must send out Marines above the rank of Rear Admiral. Looking at the inconspicuous silver word on the rating, Gawain's mouth gradually widened. Pussyfoot Maneuver's breakthrough helped him open the last barrier between the bronze and silver levels and truly become one of the strongest people on the sea. According to the classification rules of the Cross Guild, Gawain's current combat power corresponds to that of a pirate with a bounty ranging from over 100 million to 1 billion. In the first half of the Grand Line, Paradise, unless he's extremely unlucky and encounters people such as Okiji, there will basically not be too many opponents. The position of the 7 warlords of the sea originally only existed in Gawain's imagination, but now he has the opportunity to touch it. But there is only a slight chance. After all, even the weakest of the 7 warlords of the sea, according to the system's rating, is at the top of the silver rank, and the vast majority are at the gold rank. As for top-notch pirates like Hawkeyes, they have undoubtedly entered the ranks of diamond, which symbolizes absolute power. But in the East Blue, I can say that I can walk sideways. But my combat power is close to the upper limit of my potential. Gawain frowned slightly. He would never forget that after the pirates under his command reached their potential limit, no matter how much they practiced, they could not make any further progress. He was unwilling to accept that kind of situation happening to him. It's time to consider breaking through the upper limit of my potential. I won't consider body transformation for now. That means I have to rely on the devil fruit, or... Gawain recalled the battle between Kuro and Jin in Raven Harbor and the improvement of his potential after he realized his true nature. But now there is no one in the East Blue who can bring him such pressure. Is it only possible after we reach the Grand Line? Gawain murmured. But at this moment, there was a sound of the window opening in the distance. He looked up and saw an orange tree on the windowsill, its leaves rustling in the sea breeze. Right. Gawain touched his nose, turned his head to look at the broken floor around him, and left with a guilty conscience. The next day, Kuro and others came to the harbor to practice as usual. All they could see was countless broken floors. It was no longer possible to stand on the ground in the center of the harbor. What's going on here? Jin frowned. I practiced too much yesterday, and my body was at its limit. I fell into a deep sleep when I returned to my room, and I had no idea what was going on outside. Zoro nodded. I'm almost the same, but to do something like this, the captain should be the only one here besides the 3 of us. He practiced secretly while we were resting? After speaking, Zoro took a deep breath. Too insidious. No. Kuro shook his head, pushed his glasses up habitually, and said calmly, is he trying to stop us from training? Is he trying to delay the time of being surpassed by such a childish trick as destroying the training grounds? Gawain, you have fallen. In order to keep your position, you actually started to play such a trick? Zoro was stunned and subconsciously wanted to defend Gawain, but before he could open his mouth, he was held down by Jin, who shook his head at him obscurely and whispered, it's useless. Kuro, once he makes up his mind, he won't change it easily. Is that so? Zoro also chose to shut up and watched Kuro perform silently. The destruction of the training ground did not stop the enthusiasm of the crowd at all. They walked excitedly to a flat beach and, after a brief warm-up, began their own training. And it's getting more and more harsher. After all, it is well known that when the first person in your dormitory starts to get higher grades, others will inexplicably feel anxious, thinking, he works so hard, but I am still a loser. The only way to resolve it is to roll it up in the same way. Besides, they all grew this month. After Jin became proficient in the observation hockey, he reached the bronze level. Zoro's changes are even more earth-shaking. As a newcomer, he successively defeated the Naib brothers and Django and became the de facto number 4 figure on the ship. His strength has almost doubled compared to more than a month ago. At the same time, the Naib brothers, who had completed their patrol mission at Raven Harbor, were sitting in a cake shop at the harbor, enjoying a rare morning tea. Ah! Butchie put a whole piece of cake into his mouth, but before he had time to chew it, a rapid ringing sound came from the den mushy in his arms. Gulp. Butchie swallowed the cake with a flushed face, then took out the den mushy and connected it. Boss Butchie. We found the whereabouts of Verity, but there was a very scary man there who was not reported in the intelligence. Who? I'm not sure, but those eyes are like an eagle's. Chapter 70, The World's Number 1 Swordsman Eagle Eyes? A man that Gawain had mentioned suddenly emerged in Butchie's mind. Hawkeyes? The man who is known as the world's number 1 swordsman? The guy that Zoro talks about every day? After speaking, a trace of solemnity appeared on Butchie's face, then he turned to look at Sham and said, if it really is that guy, then I guess no one except the captain can be his opponent. Sham was slightly stunned, then waved his hand casually. Didn't the captain say that Hawkeyes is a top-notch pirate even in the New World? How could he come to the East Blue, which is recognized as the weakest sea? Maybe they just share the same characteristics. After all, there are many people in this world who look similar. Isn't the captain and that actor? He. Butchie heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. It must be a misunderstanding. Butchie picked up the receiver and said to the pirate over there, just keep an eye on it. Sham and I will be there soon. We have been searching for this target for more than a month. Once we are sure, I will inform the captain. Understood. After hanging up the den mushy, Butchie hurriedly stuffed a few pieces of cake into his mouth, gave the remaining cookies to the children around him, and then left with Sham. The pirate ship in the harbor set sail a few minutes later and sped towards the location of the Verity. A few hours later, dozens of miles away from Raven Harbor, a pirate ship that was broken in the middle slowly sank into the water, and the skull flag with a round shield underneath was gradually swallowed up by the sea. The ocean-going restaurant, Verity, is floating quietly on the sea not far away. In the kitchen, a group of chefs came and went, serving exquisite dishes to the table just to entertain the only guest. How could we encounter such a big shot? That's Hawkeyes, the man known as the world's strongest swordsman and one of the 7 warlords of the sea who holds the plundering license from the world government. Even Mr. Zeph broke out in a cold sweat when he saw that guy. But fortunately, the enemy's target is the White Knight pirate, not us. Between his words, Chef Patty, who looks like Popeye, with a rough face and a pink scarf tied around his chest, raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead and looked into the dining area with lingering fear. A man wearing a black felt hat and with a stern face was eating the exquisite dishes on a table in an orderly manner. His movements were extremely graceful, yet his eating speed was frighteningly fast. In just half an hour, the dishes on the table that had not been processed had piled up into a small mountain, but the man showed no intention of stopping. Only when the people in the kitchen were so tired that they could not even straighten their backs did the man stop what he was doing and wipe his mouth gracefully. The man was naturally Hawkeyes, who had fought his way from the New World to the East Blue, and he had only one purpose for this trip. Are you from the White Knight pirate? His sharp eyes, like an eagle's, fell on the bruised and battered Naib brothers standing beside him. The two of them stammered and couldn't utter a complete sentence for a long time, simply because the shock they felt from the man in front of them was too strong. While they were several kilometers away, a green light cut their ship in half, and the remaining force did not even degraze, it flew all the way to the end of their sight. The battle was over before the Naib brothers even had time to react. Fortunately, there were no casualties on the ship. In the impression of the Naib brothers, even Gawain, who was as strong as a monster, cannot do such a thing. Seeing the two people talking incoherently, Hawkeyes gradually lost his patience. He took out a big black sword shaped like a cross from behind him, put the blade against Sham's neck, and said calmly, "If you want to live, tell me where Gawain is now." Sham couldn't help trembling all over. He didn't want to betray Gawain and said with difficulty, "Even if you kill me, don't even think about getting any information about my captain from me." Interesting. It's not just that bloodthirsty look in his eyes, he can also make his subordinates loyal. My interest in this man is growing. Hawkeyes smiled slightly, then turned to look at Butchie beside him and said calmly, "I'm giving you 2 choices now. Either watch your companions fall here or pass the message to Gawain and ask him to come and see me." Butchie. Sham turned to look at his hesitant brother and said loudly, "Don't forget who gave you the chance to live again. You can't betray that man even if you die. It doesn't matter if people like us die here. We can just consider it as paying off the debt we owed. But he is different, he is going to lead everyone." Sham's growing excitement was interrupted by Hawkeyes' blade.